and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency on Tuesday, August 25th, 2015. It is now 7 p.m. We're still getting used to our web streaming, so we apologize if there are any hiccups this evening. And I just wanted to note as well that we have all of the comments that were submitted electronically. Anything that was submitted before our agenda was printed, those were included with our agendas. And then anything that was received afterwards, we have hard copies here for everybody. So everything is included in the record for that purpose. So we'll call this to order. Can we have roll call, please? Anything that was submitted before our agenda was here. There you go.
Mayor Skillman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Moore.
Present.
Councilmember DeLasso.
Here.
Councilmember Harvey.
Here.
Councilmember Landman.
Here.
Thank you. And if you would all please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. On the Pledge of Allegiance or the roll call? That's a first, but sure. Come forward, Mr. Barrett.
Good evening, Council, members of the public. I want to thank Mr. DeLosso tonight for standing aside from the American flag during the pledge. That's the right thing to do. That's proper etiquette, and I think at times credit needs to be given where credit is due. Patty Minnis, when she was on the City Council, stepped to the side so the flag would be in full view of everybody in the room as a common courtesy. So did Harold Berkemeyer. So did yours truly, Councilman George Barrich. Let me think who else stepped to the side. Mr. Landman did not. Mr. Landman wanted to stand in front of the American flag over multiple requests to please move to the side. And I do want to give you credit, sir, Mr. DeLosso, for doing the right thing and stepping aside. It's a minor inconvenience, and I think it shows a lot of class. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to approval of minutes. And sorry, unless there's anybody else from the public who would like to comment on the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. We'll move on to approval of minutes and notice of reading of all resolutions and ordinances introduced and or adopted under this agenda. So this is for the regular meeting we had on August 11th. Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? May the record reflect that's a 5-0 vote in favor of passage. Now we'll move on to the housekeeping items, for which I will turn to our city clerk. So this is for the regular meeting we had on August 11th.
Thank you, Mayor. For the benefit of everyone in attendance, please observe the following. Silence electronic devices, including cell phones. Audience members are advised that the chamber and hallways carry sound, so please keep conversations to a minimum or conduct them outside the building. Photographs or video recordings using tripods or other means that would be distracting are to be taken only from the designated media area along the south wall of the chamber. Members of the public wishing to address the council are asked to complete a separate speaker card for each item. Speaker cards are located on the table inside the entrance to the chamber. Place the completed speaker card next to the city, give the speaker card to the city clerk, and when their name is called, speakers should come forward to the podium and direct their comments to the city council.
Thank you for that. Yes, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Mayor, for the audience's benefit. My name is George Barrich. I'm a former Cotati City Councilman here. And I'd like to say, for the betterment of the community, I think it's important once again to point out that we have no housekeeping rules that are official. We have no procedures whatsoever that were ever voted on by the City Council on how the public is supposed to proceed during these meetings. And over a couple of years of objections to the fact that many cities put forth a policy on how they want the public to conduct themselves, whether they want their phones to be turned off, where the media could stand or should stand, whether they can fill out speaker cards or not. And it's actually brought to the City Council and brought before the public for a formal vote. But this City Council refuses to do things the right way. And it is disturbing that the council will not entertain the fact that this needs to be done. Somehow these rules were conjured up behind closed doors by the city manager or the city clerk. And I guess the people who come into these meetings late now have no idea about these rules, because now the city council doesn't even print these rules in the agenda like they used to. So I guess it's just for the people who happen to be here on time. But also, a couple of the rules here are illegal. It is illegal for the city council to require any member of the public to fill out a speaker's card in order to address its local government. This is old news. It's in your council member's handbook. It's been reminded to you over and over again that it is a misdemeanor, violation of state law, that filling out a speaker card is to be optional. And you owe the public an apology, and you also owe them an explanation why you continue to skirt proper procedure and good governance. Good governance is all about trying to do the right thing and relying on the public to help you, who have some knowledge on how this stuff is supposed to be done, to come before you and ask you to do a little research and do your homework and then come back and just do the right thing. That's what adults do. That's what real city leaders do. So I'm not going to let you down. I'm going to keep coming before you and asking you to please do the right thing for the betterment of the community. Right now we have no housekeeping rules. We have no housekeeping items, and this is all a hoax on our community. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I know this has come up a couple of times, and that's one of the reasons why we have on the speaker card that we respectfully request people to fill out the speaker cards. And I know that it helps me run the meeting. And then we also do include information about it, saying that they're not required to identify themselves. So just to clarify that point. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on the housekeeping items? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment. And we'll move on to announcements. The City of Cotati has special open office hours on Monday evenings from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. in the Community Development Department at City Hall as part of its Cotati Open for Business program. This program provides personalized assistance and information to developers, current Cotati business owners, and those interested in starting a new business within the city. Special open office hours on Monday evenings. And we're getting a 10-second delay in the speakers, so if there's any way we can fix that. Does everybody have their sound turned off on there? Okay. Okay. The Runner Park Cotati Regional Library hosts events for all ages, including art exhibits, book clubs, and children's programs. All events are free and open to the public. For more information, call the library at 584-9121 or visit sonomalibrary.org. The Cotati Historical Society Museum is open regularly the second Tuesday of each month from 5 to 7 p.m., Saturdays from 1 to 4 p.m., and by appointment. For more information, call 794-0304. Citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up at nixle.com. Now we'll move on to proclamations. We have one this evening. There's a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Cotati declaring Pollution Prevention Week and Creek Week in Cotati. Now, I understand that I am presenting this to Councilman Landman on behalf of the, is it? Okay, I was going to say the RRWA, but I was, okay. Since you are here to take it, can I just pass it over to you and you can share the whereases at their next meeting? I think that would be perfect. Thank you. Absolutely, thank you. And please make sure to thank them for all their work.
Will do.
Now we'll move on to our first presentation, which is the 2015 Water Conservation presentation. And for that, I will turn to our City Manager, Damian Obed. And as I understand it, this is just for bragging rights. There's nothing that we're voting on tonight. Technology is helpful when it works, but so frustrating when it doesn't. So I apologize for the delay. If you could please be patient for just a moment, we'll get this started.
I will say this isn't the most interesting one I see. Okay. Of course, you test it before the meeting, everything works fine.
Oh, sure.
Decides not to now.
Yeah, it's on HDMI 1 now. So, it's not receiving the signal. I thought I had.
I'm just going to take it out.
Okay.
Do it manually. All right. Mayor and members of the council, so we're going to do this manually tonight, and I'll read off the relevant statistics that we had talked about. The questions came up last time, and we'll go through them right now. As you know, the state instituted emergency water restrictions on every city and every city within the state. The emergency regulations went into effect in June of this year, and it's for Cotati, it would be the regulations were a 20% mandatory reduction in water use, and also reduced irrigation to a maximum of 2 times per week. And the comparison period that we're required, we and every other city in the state are required to compare to is the same period in 2013. So when they compare reduction, they look at the 2013 prior period. And the City Council continued the 20% water conservation stage to align with the state's mandatory 20% conservation requirement, and also instituted the state-required irrigation restriction of 2 times per week. So when we spoke about this at the last meeting, we had the last update, we talked primarily about single family, but some questions came up about some of the other account classes. So I'll go through, I'll start with single family, and I'll go through some of the other ones. So with single family, we have a little bit over 2,000 accounts, single family accounts, and 20% of our customers are new customers, so they weren't account holders in 2013, so we don't compare them because there's nothing to directly compare. And then 75% of our single family homes are under the 20% goal. So in other words, they've exceeded the 20% requirement, and only 5% of our single family accounts are over that 20, are not meeting the 20% goal. And for commercial, for this last read period, which goes from April to June, they are the commercial accounts as a group, and they make up roughly, they're a fairly small percentage of our overall account population. The commercial accounts, we have 169. So as I said earlier, single family are about 2,000. Commercial are about 169 accounts, and they're down about 22% from the same period in 2013. Multifamily accounts, we have about 107 multifamily accounts, and they're down about 32% from the same period in 2013. And then irrigation-only accounts. So these are accounts that don't serve any other purpose but irrigation. So a lot of accounts, like your typical single-family account, will be what they refer to as a mixed use account. because they serve domestic needs and also irrigation on the same physical meter. So irrigation-only meters are like what it sounds. It only serves irrigation. There's no other use for those meters. And they're lumped together, so we have commercial irrigation, multifamily irrigation, and then city irrigation accounts. When you lump them all together, they're down 62% from 2013. If you look at the chart that unfortunately I wasn't able to show you tonight, it's pretty dramatic because you can see the prior year usage, and it just drops off like a cliff to close to nothing for 2015. And we just finished reading we read every 2 months. We just finished a reading cycle. So I expect by the next council meeting we'll have the next block of information to give the council another update on the June to August period. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions from the council?
For commercial,
Okay. All right. Seeing none, I will open it up to public comment. Is there anybody who'd like to comment on the water conservation presentation? Yes, Mr. Barrich.
they're fairly small.
I'd like to ask the city manager in the breakdown of commercial, family units and so forth, where home-based businesses fare into this calculation, and how did the home-based businesses fare in regards to the others?
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment on the water presentation? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment. And then there's nothing to vote on, so we will move on to the next item. I'll move on to approval of the final agenda. Are there any changes that we need to make to the agenda this evening?
No changes.
Okay. Now I'll move on to citizens' business. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any items listed on the consent calendar or any matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda during this period. Comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for items on the consent calendar. And for those folks who haven't been here since we started the web streaming, the clock actually shows up on the screen. So when it gets close to about the 30-second mark, I may nod to you, just not to interrupt, but to let you know that the numbers are starting to go down. Now I have 2 speaker cards for citizens' business. The first is Joan Simon. Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. Joan Simon, Katati. I'm going to address what I think is a city policy matter, although it does arise out of the tragedy of the Stanley family, but it doesn't involve the facts of that case. To me, one of the tragedies that came out of the Stanley situation, to be heard later this evening, is that their young boys were unnecessarily further traumatized by the thoughtless actions of our city. When police officers were sent to the family home, instead of asking the family, the parents, to come down to the station to willingly accept the abatement papers. My understanding is that police officers arrived. I actually saw them. I happened to be outside. I saw them arrive. The father was not at home. He called the police station. He asked that they not come back, that he would come down to the station. Instead, police officers did come back at 9 o'clock to serve the papers. And there was really absolutely no reason for this. I think, mafiosos, John Gotti, people like that, they go down. They don't have to be arrested or served with warrants on the spot. And when you have children involved, and you have the city that is actually making the complaint, and this is a nonviolent situation, I really believe that the city needs to look at what are the options for serving these kinds of papers when they know that there's children at home. It's very frightening. The Stanley boys are very well behaved, and they were very upset. I'm close to the younger son. It was very upsetting to them to have a police officer knocking at their door. I really feel it was a lapse of judgment. I think that it should be looked at, was it a lapse of judgment on the part of the city officials who decided to serve the papers in a certain way? Was it on the police side, whatever it was? And I think it needs to be looked at as to why the message wasn't relayed to the police officers that the family would come down to the station and get it to spare the boys the trauma of this happening. So I would like to say, just suggest the city look into this kind of situation. It must come up in other ways as well, and that definitely children, elderly people, et cetera, should be considered in how papers are served by the city on its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just to clarify, too, you should check out one of the attachments, which is the police report, because they did attempt to have them come down to the station, and they refused to do so, unfortunately. I have another speaker card from Prue Draper.
Call the police station. He asked that they not come back there and come down. Instead, police officers did come back at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to remind all of you that it's been a year since they moved Cotati's famous albino redwood tree. Can you believe it? It's been a year. It's survived. People looked at it that hot day and they said, oh, you should never remove a redwood in this kind of weather. That's ridiculous. You can't move a redwood that's 60 years old. That's not going to work. But so far, it's working. I got a call from the arborist who has been its great supporter since the beginning. Tom Stapleton is coming down Friday from Volcano. I've got him lined up to talk to the editor of the Community Voice. So presumably there will be some more publicity about Cotati's famous tree. But we need to remember that it's famous. I remember a year ago I said, now, you know, this could be a sort of a drawing card for tourists. Certainly when the SMART train gets going, let's try to get organized to do something special about our wonderful tree. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak on citizens' business? Yes, Mr. Carricker.
Greg Carricker. I thought I was going to bring you some news tonight, but it looks like you're already aware of it. Earlier this evening, I ran into Joyce Garcia, who said she was at home 2 weeks ago watching the podcast and was completely unable to hear almost anything that was spoken, especially when Mr. Barrich was speaking. So I know a lot was invested in this, and I'd suggest maybe a second opinion would be a good idea. There's a couple reputable vendors right here in Cotati, Loud and Clear Music and Video Protection, who might be able to take a look at your audio-visual system and make it work professionally, because frankly what I'm seeing isn't very professional.
Thank you for that. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment during the citizens' business? Yes, Mr. Barrich.
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding the albino redwood tree, I don't remember anybody saying that it was nearly impossible to move that tree. What I remember people saying was that it was terribly expensive, number one. Number two, to move the tree. Number two, that the city should not be responsible for incurring the costs of moving that tree, and that was between the landowner and the SMART train folks and so forth. So that aside, I also like to say that what Joan Simon doesn't seem to understand is that City Hall will turn off the water to Cotati homes who have kids in the houses that are late paying their water bills. So where is the outrage for the children when some of us have repeatedly come before you and says you can't turn off waters in homes because somebody is 30 days late in paying their water bill with kids in the house? Also, the last council meeting, the council voted on resurfacing the basketball court over here about a block away. And Mr. Deloso said that he had spoken to no less than 10 members of the public who recommended that that be done when other people had advised that we put in a skateboard park. All I'm saying is that maybe it's good governance to state the names of these people when the council has those people in their pocket or want to refer to. That would be helpful. And just because these meetings adjourn does not mean that you can escape criticisms and questions from the public after the meeting is over. The city attorney has been clear that you are city council members 24/7, and that inside and outside these chambers you should be making yourself available to the public for questions. And Mr. Moore and I had a disagreement on whether the city shakes down citizens and businesses for money. Well, of course they shake down people for money. That's part of what cities and governments do. Mercy Wellness in Cotati is a perfect example. They pay the city $30,000 a year to maintain their business for practically nothing. You charge the town's pot dispensary $30,000 a year to operate. In my book, that's shakedown money. The mob would envy such tactics. Business licenses in this town is shakedown money. Businesses don't get any services from the city every year for paying those business licenses. And Mr. Deloso, a couple weeks ago, you mentioned that on the record that you requested that the police chief provide you statistics. Personally, provide you statistics. Sir, you can't do that. I don't know how many times the city staff have to tell you, you have no right to ask city employees to be your personal research people. You're supposed to go to the city manager if you have any requests whatsoever, and you're not supposed to be communicating
Mr. Barrett, you're over your time
Thank you, ma'am.
limit, so.
I'm just finishing up.
Thank you very much
And I would
for
just ask you
winding
to
up.
read your
Appreciate
council member's handbook, please.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment during citizens' business? All right, seeing none, I will close citizens. Yes.
Just a comment. I'm very familiar with the council member handbook, having been elected twice by overwhelming margins by the citizens over a 20-year span of time. So I think I've proven that I understand that, and I would never directly ask a staff person. Certainly that it was a recommendation. So people ought to be clear on what the truth is. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
That you are city
Really
council members
wish we could get the delay to
24/7.
not be on the speakers. Were you trying to adjust the monitor as well? Because something's picking up on it.
And Mr. Moore and I had a
I
disagreement
don't
on
know what's
whether
causing the
city
echo.
shakes down
Okay.
I'm in
citizens
communication
and
with our
businesses for
AV
money.
technicians
Well,
in the
of course
back.
they shake
Okay.
down
I'm wondering maybe they have the
for
sound
money.
turned
That's
up.
part of what city
Okay.
I
and
wanted to make
governments
sure
do.
that this monitor
Mercy
did not
Wellness
have
in
sound
Cotati
on
is a
it.
perfect
Okay.
example.
Echoing. And the other thing I might ask is that if there's anybody in-house that is maybe watching the podcast on an electronic device, perhaps they have it turned up.
Nothing.
On the
Oh,
other
okay.
hand, it is running through our sound system.
Pot dispensary,
So that probably would
$30,000
matter.
a year. to
So
operate. In my book, that's shakedown money.
I am communicating with our AV technicians to get it worked out.
Well, at least, Mr. Carricker can be reassured that not only are we being heard, but we're being heard twice. Okay. So, I wanted to see, are there any direction on future agenda items this week?
Also, a couple weeks ago, you
On this side?
mentioned that on the record
And-
that you
Okay.
requested that the
So we'll move on to consent calendar. We have items 3,
provide you statistics.
4, 5, 6, and 7 this week.
I'll move to approve items 3 through 7 on the consent calendar.
City
Second, we
to be your
need to take public comment first before we. I'm getting thrown off by the echo. Okay. So, on those items, is there anybody who wishes to speak on any of the consent calendar items? I don't have any speaker cards specifically. Yes, Mr. Barrett.
Regarding item 3,
All right, seeing none, I will close.
tonight you're going to ratify and do a final vote on banning big trucks in the historic downtown area. And I want to remind you something that Mr. Lloyd Draper said before this council some years ago. He said, "Council, I've been living here for 54 years. And he proceeded to explain. I got up afterwards and I says, well, that explains a lot then. You know, the fact is, Old Redwood Highway was and still is a truck route. And I don't understand how Anyone who can live here for 44 years and not know that it is impossible for some big trucks with a full load make it up the Cotati grade on Highway 101 going more than 30 miles an hour. I don't understand how people don't know that. Old Redwood Highway through Cotati is an important alternative route for trucks that cannot make it up that grade because it's too dangerous. Every truck route is a car route, Mr. Deloso, but not every car route is a truck route. And if you don't understand this, and you don't understand civil engineering when it comes to roads, you have no business on this council. And where was the Cotati Historical Society trying to save the historic Cotati truck route? Where were they? So now we're going to expand this very expensive police department and their services to monitor the big trucks coming through the historic downtown district. We're going to devote expensive police resources to do sting operations for weeks on end to stop these big trucks coming in town. Well, that's brilliant. The public's just going to love the resources being diverted towards the big trucks. This ban on the big trucks is a step in attempting to make the historic downtown of Cotati a pedestrian mall, a pedestrian plaza. That's where we're going here. It's not about big trucks. It's about prohibiting all motorized vehicles and traffic in the downtown area to fulfill this silly, crazy, walkable downtown-specific plan that you have very little or no money for. And I should say that if any big trucks get in an accident going up 101 with any other motorists because they're going 25 to 30 miles an hour because you've made it illegal to bring their truck through Cotati, the blood will be on your hands. You're on notice.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment on any of the consent calendar items? All right. Yes.
Make it up the Cotati grade on Highway 101 going more than 30 miles an hour. I don't understand how people don't know that. Old Redwood Highway.
Two brief comments. I don't believe that Lloyd Draper 54 years ago ever spoke to George Barrich. If he did, it would not have been in a friendly way. Second, the Cotati Historical Society never even considered whether the highway through town was something historic or not. We care about things that really matter. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there anybody else who'd like to make comments on the consent calendar items? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment on the consent calendar items, and we'll bring it back to council. Do I have a motion?
I will move to approve items 3 through 7 on the consent calendar.
I will second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? May the record reflect that as a 5-0 vote in favor of passage of the consent calendar items. Now we'll move on to public hearing. Give it a moment to catch up on there. Okay. And I have a good deal number of speaker cards on this item. I would just ask to keep this in a good decorous fashion, and things will go very smoothly. I want everybody to have their chance to speak. And so I will call folks up that I have speaker cards for first.
Madam Mayor, if
yes.
I might, through the chair, before we begin item 8. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to recuse myself, living well within the 500 feet of the affected property, and since this is a decision that could potentially affect property values, the appropriate thing to do is with a possible conflict of interest for me to step out. So I will be stepping out for the duration of this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I have a note to that effect. I appreciate you reminding me.
You're on notice.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment on any of the consent calendar items? Yes. Okay, so the first speaker card I have is for Nancy Uber-Kellogg. What's that? Oh, sorry. Hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize. First, we have a staff presentation by Vicki Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. I just have a brief background report for you all tonight. The actions before the council are to direct the property owner to abate the public nuisance that exists at 601 West School Street no later than September 28th, 2015, and to authorize the Community Development Director to proceed with abatement if the property owner fails to complete the abatement by that deadline, and to affix a lien to the property tax rolls in the approximate amount of $35,000 to recover costs for the city to complete the abatement. Just by way of background, a very unfortunate fire occurred on the property on June 28th, 2014, which destroyed the residence of David and Lisa Stanley at that address. Following that emergency response, the city's building official gave the Stanleys a temporary one-year occupancy of an accessory structure that existed on the property in order to provide them with emergency housing. Since that time, there's been no progress toward rebuilding of the primary structure. There have been no plans submitted for permitting, and as a result, the family has been living in the accessory structure for about 14 months now. Immediately following the fire, we worked with the Stanleys in those ensuing months to accomplish several necessary actions on the property, including permits to demolish the structure remains, debris removal, securing the site for last winter's rainy season, and removal of the burned motor home, and they've complied with those orders and kept the property, I think, in the best condition that they probably could, given the circumstances. However, by March of this year, we had received no building plans for rebuilding the structure, so city staff sent the Stanleys a letter advising them that we didn't see a possible way for them to meet the June 28th deadline, given permitting and construction times. We did not receive a response to that March letter. June 29th, the day following the deadline to vacate the property, we sent the Stanleys a notice of the declaration of public nuisance and gave them 30 days to vacate the property. Again, had no response to that notification. So on July 30th, there was a citation by the Cotati Police Department for the violations of the municipal code. Then on August 13th, following the August 13th notification of tonight's hearing, we were advised by the Stanleys that they have secured off-site housing. They have provided us with a copy of their lease agreement, which you were provided in hard copy tonight and is available to the public. So they have now vacated the property, and I believe that vacation date was the 15th of August. So that has partially abated the conditions that exist on the property. Tonight's recommendation, again, is to completely abate the conditions on the property, which the move-off partially does, but we're also requesting the removal of the structure that they've been inhabiting and the foundation that still remains of the primary structure that was burned. And we're asking for that to be accomplished by September 28th, which is a required 30-day period, a 30-day period that's required by our code. At this time, we're not pursuing any other alternatives of civil action or criminal action. I believe the Stanleys' attorney is in the audience tonight. He will, I believe, request the council to postpone this action tonight, due to a pending foreclosure action, to give the Stanleys a chance to clean up the property themselves. Staff is not recommending that because there are no guarantees that through the foreclosure or insurance settlement that the nuisance would be abated. We hope that it will be. We've given the 30 days for it to be accomplished, but it's our recommendation tonight that the council direct the property owners to the abatement, and to authorize staff to follow through if it doesn't occur, so that we can affix liens as necessary to clean the property and recover the costs. So that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any detailed questions that you have before or after the public comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll bring it back to council. Are there any questions for staff at this time? Yes, Councilmember Harvey.
So, as I understand it then, there still is till September 28th, and then the abatement process would then be null and void if it gets cleaned up by the 28th, correct? Because supposedly there's a lease that we've been given, and what's left, as you stated, was the cleanup. Is that
That's
a
correct.
correct understanding?
That's correct,
Okay,
yes.
so there still is time.
There's still 30 days, yes.
Okay, thank you.
We're asking for that to be accomplished.
Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. So since we are discussing property, and I don't believe the Stanleys are here, we do have a representative for the Stanley family. So, oh, you are here? Okay. So would you like to come forward, or would you like your attorney to come forward?
I believe the Stanley's attorney is in the audience tonight. He will, I believe, request the council to...
Asinine meeting that this council has ever come to. You probably never had your house burned down. You probably never lost everything, okay? We did. It is beyond devastating. So we have an insurance company and a mortgage company. They're doing battle with one another on the amount of money that's to be paid to rebuild the house. Okay, they're $100,000 short on the payout. That's between them. We're left on the sidelines to just wait until this gets resolved. Now, Vicki, in the beginning, said that she was going to work with us and put us in our temporary housing for 1 year. And then once we got the main structure built, we were going to get the other granny unit up to code, and because it was not in a place where it was absolutely not allowed. It just needed to be modified to accept the code. And now she's changed her tune into it's got to be completely abated. Now, I don't know any of you very well, but I'd like to know, when do you guys stop kicking a guy that's down? Is he got to die? I mean, we've been through hell, and now we get this kind of crap that we have to now destroy another perfectly good building on our property with an asinine amount, $35,000. It costs $18,000 to destroy the home. This other unit is half the size. So why would the city want to profit from our loss? That's exactly what it would be, because they could not get enough of your employees or equipment there to justify a $35,000 bill. So with that said, I want to just make sure everybody understands that we didn't intentionally stay there, as some people have said, that we were basically squatting on our own property. We were left in limbo because of the insurance and the mortgage company. So is that clear to everybody?
You can make a presentation where it's not a back and forth, but thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So is there anybody else? Sorry, I'm sorry. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on behalf of the property owners?
I'm the property owner, I'm Lisa Stanley. On June 28th of 2014, our lives were forever altered. In a matter of hours, our forever home and all precious mementos were gone. This was a home that was chosen, that we chose to raise our children and host slumber parties for our future grandchildren. My boys came home from the hospital to that house. My home was full of baseball pictures, artwork created from little hands at preschool, and handprints down the hall. A familiar creak on the hall floorboards when somebody passed. is now just a precious memory. Our solace was the grand unit that the city refers to as a converted garage. It was never a garage. When the home was purchased in 1986 by my parents, the structure was an artist studio built by the Keys family. There was power, water, and a restroom in that structure. In later years, it was remodeled to include a bedroom and kitchen facilities that afforded us the blessing of taking care of my parents and allowing my daughter a place to live while attending Sonoma State and later saving to purchase her first home. This is more than a structure. The door jamb in the hall of that little house shows a history of my children's growth and many happy memories of family dinners and sleepovers with grandparents. My father overbuilt everything, and in conjunction with the structure originally built by the Keys family, the city notes this structure as unsafe for habitation. But I'd like you to know that that home has been there since the early 70s. It's been through earthquakes and withstood the fire without any damage whatsoever. Not a cracked window, not a damaged wall, and zero water damage resulted. A testament to the construction by the two previous property owners. In addition, I would like you to know that I've always been a good neighbor, and for the past 17 years have proudly maintained my home. Being considered a public nuisance is beyond humiliating.
Is there anybody else?
When Christine Alderman had her stroke, I was the only neighbor that was willing to be on her emergency call list. I did it then, and even after the harassment that her daughter Lori has inflicted on my family, I would do it again for Christine. I have always been a good citizen of Cotati. I formed the West Side Neighborhood Watch Program and volunteered for 2 years on the design review while working full-time and raising 2 young boys and a teenage daughter. Through the years, I've opened my home to council members running for election and those running for state senate. I have volunteered in our schools and ran for a short time in an organic coffee cart in downtown. Although we were not able to meet the city demands and timelines for moving, it was not because there wasn't an effort made on our part. For the past years, we have searched for our housing for our family, our 2 young boys being the primary motivation and the right thing to do, not because of the city requests. You haven't had your head in the sand. You were keenly aware that rentals in our area are very difficult to find. And when you have pets, it's even more hard. Parting with my dogs was never an option. That structure allowed my family to begin healing after our traumatic loss. We aren't the bad citizens that you portray us to be. We really aren't. And I would like to point out that all issues with Lori were instigated by Lori. She's an unreliable source of information, and I have requested all correspondence with the city and Lori Alderman to be shared with my friends and neighbors on the west side. I believe that there's room for negotiation and compromise, and I hope that you do the right thing.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So now we'll move on to speaker cards, or did you want to present as well, or were you?
Yes, I actually filled out a speaker card.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know your name, so. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the City Council. My name is Michael P. Scott. I'm an attorney in Santa Rosa. A colleague of mine, Charles Applegate, couldn't be here tonight. He has also been retained. Both of us have just been retained by the Stanleys in this matter. And part of our scope of our work is to deal with the insurance company and with the foreclosing entities in this matter. I would ask that the City Council please refrain from sending that train down the tracks at this point and putting everyone into a box that we can't get out of. I believe that the city has plenty of flexibility here to hold off and forbear on proceeding with an abatement of this property. My colleague, Mr. Applegate, and I will be contacting and working with the insurance company and with the foreclosing entities to try to get someone to step forward and take responsibility and to provide some funds in order to get this property cleaned up. I would point out that the notice of today's meeting, I do believe, for purposes of due process, does meet the standard when it comes to the one specific citation to local law that was put into the notice of abatement, and that one specific citation to local law that was allegedly being violated is no longer in violation. That is, my clients have moved off the property. They are no longer inhabiting the property. They have a long-term lease elsewhere. That was the main purpose of this meeting today, and that has been resolved already. I believe that there is, with respect, problems with the due process claiming that the entire property must be cleaned up and that all debris must be removed, and also that all the other foundations must be removed, when in fact there is no citation to any local or state law that is being violated by that provision. However, I am not here to try to slow this process down. I am here to facilitate getting the process done, getting the property cleaned up as the city would like. But I would like to have the flexibility to do that and to be able to tell the insurance companies and the foreclosing entities involved that they need to step forward and act now, and that there is no hard and fast deadline that's going to happen on September 28th that will allow them to sit on their hands and say, okay, well, we don't need to do anything, and after the 28th, we'll just leave it. I don't think that's a good solution for the city, because that leaves it on the city's part to go ahead and clean up the property. I would like to see the responsible parties here, the insurance company and the foreclosing parties, step forward and do that cleanup on your behalf. And that's what I would like to see done. And I'm asking that this city council table this abatement proceeding for the time being, see where we are in, let's say, 30 days. If you want to come back in 2 weeks, we could do that. The point is, rather than tie yourselves down to this abatement procedure that must go forward within 30 days, I would ask that the city take a breath, step back, and say, okay, we have somebody here who seems to be knowledgeable about this and wants to do something about it right away, and let's see if we can't get the thing cleaned up without the city's intervention.
Thank you. And I just had a quick question before you leave the podium. So we've been talking about this lease, but it says that it will not begin until September 1st. So they're going to be moving in September 1st? Or I'm sorry, I'm asking a question, so let's not shout out things.
I'm unsure as to when they moved in. I was under the impression that we're already off the property and that they'd already moved in.
Okay.
And they can clear that up, I think.
Okay, thank you for that.
Madam Mayor, I can help with that as well.
Yes.
Further into the attachments of the lease, there is another period that the rental covers from the 15th to the 30th.
Okay. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Okay, so now I will move on to speaker cards. And we've got Nancy Uber Kellogg.
Good evening. I first heard about this hearing 2 or 3 days ago, and I didn't know the particulars, really. Lisa stopped by. We live in the neighborhood where they lived. And so I don't know any of the particulars. I didn't know them until I got here, so I can't speak to them. But I did want to speak as a person who's known the Stanleys since we first moved into the neighborhood 17, 18 years ago. And they have been just sterling neighbors and friends. They've always been very conscientious and communicated well with us, watched out for our son. So I wanted to speak to that, which is the only thing I can speak to. And I'm sorry for the fire. I'm sorry for the distress that it's caused other people in the neighborhood. But I hope you have a way to keep in mind that they're really fine people and would like to see this taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now I also have a speaker card from Sandra Walton.
have been a neighbor of the Stanleys for the entire time they've lived across the street from me. I live directly across the street from them, and I know they are good neighbors, and I'm glad to hear people speaking up to that. The Stanleys have no history of negligence about their property. They've always kept it very well. Their neighbors, anyone would be glad to have. Their yard, but especially their vegetable and flower garden, was well appreciated by passerbys. I was particularly upset about one aspect of this whole proceeding. I understand the progression of government, but I feel in this case we're a small town, and a small town has the ability to respond to individual instances, and this seems to be a case where that's not happening. This is a family who's lived in Cotati for a long time. A tragic accident took their home and its entire contents and left them with trauma that they have been dealing with for well over a year. This trauma has been exacerbated by a couple of things. One is the housing situation and the arduous process of dealing with banks and insurance families and being involved in that whole scandal that affected the mortgage lending operation in this country. There's also been continuous harassment by a single neighbor that is added to their trauma because there was no evidence of any compassionate response to their loss. And because it was continuous and because it was severe, it only added to the whole situation of the time that has passed since the incident. It seems that, and I think their lawyer spoke to it, that there is a way in which this situation could be handled in a different way, that you have a lot of control here to handle things that perhaps a larger city doesn't have the flexibility to do. And I would hope you would consider the options that were suggested by the lawyer and certainly are supported by a number of their near neighbors.
Thank you very much. I also have a card from Prue Draper. I did. It's a challenge of me trying to read without my glasses and talking to the
Sorry, I can't hear anything with these things in my ears. I've been a neighbor of the Stanleys and also the Aldermans for over 50 years. I've lived in Cotati since 1951. I think it's a cool community. We're glad it's a city and has the ability to do things legally as a city can. But I think it's also a small town, and you just don't sabotage your neighbors. You try to get along, and we all do. That's a pretty nice neighborhood, really. We feel lucky to live there. I think anybody should. I believe that the Stanleys should be given every opportunity to make their place acceptable to the city, and the city should be willing to bend every rule they can to make that happen, because neighbors are neighbors and neighbors, and that's the way it ought to be. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I also have a card from Chelsea, I'm going to say this wrong, Agio? Was I close? Nowhere in the ballpark? Agio, okay, thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chelsea Aggio, and I am the daughter of Lisa and David Stanley over there. And I'm here to share my story on what happened June 28th. So on that day, every one of my family members' lives was changed dramatically. We lost everything, and when I say that we lost everything, I literally mean everything. Not to mention, we watched the whole thing. That day was beyond the most tragic day I have ever experienced in my life. Between the explosion, the thought of losing one of our animals that was missing throughout the whole entire fire, the sound of my mom scream when she came home from Safeway to see her house engulfed in flames, and the panic on my dad's face was the most overwhelming and tragic thing that anyone can ever imagine or experience. Unless you were there, I really don't think that you can fully understand how truly traumatic the whole experience was. That house was my home. It's where I got to see my little brothers come home for the first time. It's where I got to see them take their first steps. And it's where I opened my acceptance letter to college. It's where my boyfriend of 8 years, that's sitting over there, told me that he loved me for the very first time. And it is also where my boyfriend and I started our family with a dog that we adopted named Spencer. But never mind the fact that my family lost everything and suffered mental distress that at this point is not even repairable. I was brought here to discuss what's called a bigger issue that's at hand. I am not a lawyer, nor am I familiar with any legal innuendo, but I did read the notice sent to my dad on August 13, 2015, notifying them of this meeting, and I briefly reviewed the legal documents included in the packet. It cannot be made more clear according to these documents that they have violated Section 17, period 89, period 040A4 for being a public nuisance. I guess I should start off by saying I'm sorry my family is relying on the last thing they can call home in order to keep a roof over their head. I'm sorry they have been having such a difficult time saying goodbye to the last structure that resembles home. I am sorry they have not been able to work on rebuilding the house based off the city's timeline. But most of all, I'm sorry that the fire happened in the first place and has been such an inconvenience to the surrounding neighborhood, especially our poor friend Lori Alderman, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, who has been so tragically impacted by the loss of my family's home. How does that affect her? I'm not really sure, but okay. What was that? Good. It sounds like the city would like my family to what's so-called complete the abatement of the public nuisance and pay a tax roll of approximately $35,000 if the abatement is not complete by the property owner, which would be my family. The government is a machine, and you guys will decide to move forward however you please. But keep in mind that you don't just hold the power of deciding what you choose to do with this property, but you also hold the power of deciding just how my family might live the next few years of their life. At this point, if you decide to move forward with this exact resolution, my little brothers can kiss college goodbye. Retirement for my family will be postponed for a very, very long time. Not to mention they will continue not having health insurance, as that will be more than likely be the last thing that they will be able to afford, as if staying healthy has already been a challenge all in itself, given my father's heart condition. Oh, and God forbid one of my brothers becomes deathly ill. I hope that after you hear my side of the story, along with my friends and families, you will understand that we are real people, and monetary implications of this resolution is real and will have immense and further tragic effects on my family. Sorry about the time. At the end of the day, I know that it is your job to look at the numbers, and I understand that. But please keep in mind that not only are we real people, but we're good people. At a personal level, I am pleased asking you to reconsider your choice of action. I would like to thank you for hearing and listening to my concerns.
Thank you for that. Now, I've got a lot of speaker cards. Okay. All right. So I've also got a speaker card from an Elizabeth Sullivan. Elizabeth Sullivan.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Sullivan. I am a neighbor of the Stanleys. I live at 661 West School Street. I live approximately 2 doors down from the Stanleys. And I would like to say that I do not consider what has happened to them to be a public nuisance. I don't think that this falls in the realm of public nuisance. In my opinion, public nuisance applies to an individual or a property owner that is deliberately not fixing a situation that they have the power to fix. In this case, the Stanleys are dealing with something that any of us would have to deal with if our houses burned down, and that is the slow-moving timetable of the insurance companies and the mortgage companies. That does not happen quickly. It can't. That can take years. And so they are not moving forward, perhaps, with plans that they might be making to rebuild or do other things with that property because of what's happening to them outside of what any of us as neighbors can see, and that is involving the insurance industry and the financial industry. So I would hope to just simply put forward my viewpoint, and that is that they are lovely people. What's happened to them is utterly, unimaginably devastating, and they need some time to get back on their feet. A year is a very short period of time when you've undergone a situation like having your house burned to the ground. So that is my simple input. And again, as a neighbor, I don't find them to be a nuisance whatsoever. And I only hope that we can all rally and support as neighbors and try to help them. And I hope at some point they're able to rebuild their lives without any further interruption. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now we've also, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get through all of these speaker cards, so I appreciate everybody's support, but if we could keep it to a minimum. We've got a speaker card from Andrew Alderman.
Members of the council, the community, the police. I'm Andrew Alderman. I'm speaking in the place of my sister, Lori Alderman, who is not able to, who is not able to attend today due to emotional events. I'm going to ask for the council's, okay, my sister gave me her notes. There are things I want to say, and there are things I want to say here, but I also want to put it into my own words. So if I have to pause and break, that's the reason why. Okay, the issue at hand is the 2-month extension to abate the property, given the 13 months they have already been on the property and after it has been declared a public nuisance on July 19th. The city has not been responsible for their prior actions in the fact that the Stanley residence at this time creates an unsafe environment for the people around it. We recognize that the Stanleys have been hurt more than anybody in the neighborhood. However, other properties were damaged. In fact, our house would have been destroyed had it not been for a barrier between our house and their house that basically prevent our house from blowing up only by inches. Okay, the city's actions have been questionable. On the day of the disaster, they did not tag the buildings appropriately, and it took a while for the building inspector to show up. There was, during the demolition, whitewashing that allowed toxins such as metals and other chemicals into the ground soil, which has created a hazard to their neighbors. I realize the actions of the Stanleys, they do not have a lot of money. You cannot get blood out of a turnip. They had to do what was best for them. However, in their actions, they have also and the explosion itself did create toxins on other soils, and you have been notified about these metals that have been found. Okay.
And if it helps, we do already have our comments, and they've been incorporated into the record. So if you want to just have your own comments, that's okay as well.
The demolition, well, we understand the need for speed and for the city to make it as simple on the Stanleys for them to get things done as possible, did violate several building codes, fire codes, and vehicle codes. And
we're at the end of the 3 minutes, so if you want to just wrap up really quickly.
What we are concerned about is not about the Stanley specifically. What we're here concerned about is the health issue. We want the abatement to occur in a way that does not affect a mom who has asthma and a sister with, frankly, mental illness. Because of those two factors.
If you can stay at the microphone, then we can have it on record, but you just need to wrap it up.
Because of these factors, if the Stanleys who can't really afford this abatement, I agree with the lawyer. Give them time, let the banks do it, because we want this done right, where it does not, where the immediate environment does not affect us. And I don't think the Stanleys can do a proper abatement, considering their financial resources. It needs to be done in a proper way.
Thank you.
One last thing.
Okay, we're almost a minute over.
About my family, and I understand I'm over.
Yes, so
but
please.
I want you to recognize that the Alderman family has been here for a long time. My dad was the president of the Cotati Lions Club for 8 years. I helped build that scout hut.
Okay, we're getting a little off topic.
We have also been contributors to this community.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I've also got a speaker card from Richard King.
Richard King, 600 West School Street, live across the street from the Stanleys. I've owned my house for 30 years and had the privilege to have the Stanleys as neighbors for 28 of those. Excuse me, I've been a firefighter for 28 years, so I've been on the other side of this, of putting out fires for people and watching their lives severely impacted. So when it happened to my own neighbors, I actually really felt for them. My heart went out for them. All that I'm asking for the city to do, and this is a small city, is to have some compassion, allow for extra time to deal with the issues. I know that there's a municipal code that we have to abide by, but to have some of that extra compassion to allow people that have been devastated to work through it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you guys, I appreciate that you want to support each other, but it's really kind of slowing us down. So let me get through our last couple speaker cards. Christine Alderman.
Good evening. My name is Christine Alderman. I am the owner of the property at 473 Maple Avenue, which is next door to the Stanleys which caught fire. Nobody need tell me that I am very lucky to be standing here, as I was taking a nap a matter of yards from the source of the explosion, when our house also caught fire, which I would like noted that there were 2 houses involved here, not 1. Okay? I have no strong objection to the Stanley's rear unit remaining intact, although I would like to see any abatement done as soon as possible. But I have to object to this proposal if it means that Mr. Stanley will be allowed to do his own abatement unsupervised. The soil is almost certainly contaminated with 3 polyaromatic hydrocarbons and 2 other metals. Our soil was tested by analytical sciences of Petaluma and found to be very high in these dangerous elements. The director of the lab is willing to attest to these findings, which we sent to this council last year. Logically, Stanley's soil must also be contaminated. 2 of these agents are known to cause cancer. I am a cancer survivor. I am still on cancer drugs. I also have asthma. If it is allowed for Mr. Stanley to clear up the soil without experts' safeguards, he will almost certainly spread contamination to the other properties. They have harassed my daughter unmercifully, and I want to say something here. I think I have the right. She is the victim of a vicious attack in Australia, for which they awarded her the greatest compensation ever known in that part of the land. This is almost too much. My daughter is struggling to recover, and you have not treated her well.
Okay.
I feel that the city of Cotati is doing a great job of selling my family down the river. I therefore raise my objection and question whether the Stanleys still own the property at this point, because things have been changing very rapidly in the last few days. And as a matter of fact, Mr. and Mrs. Stanley...
If you could speak, Madam, if you could speak into the microphone, otherwise it won't be picked up on the record.
I was a child in England. My house was hit by a flying bomb. It was destroyed overnight. I also lost everything. I do understand, but I do not understand your cruelty to my daughter.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, may I also, if we can just keep things, thank you very much for everybody's patience. I've got one last card from Jen Simon.
Thank you. Hello. The Stanley home is decidedly not a public nuisance. I understand that might be some technical term you use. But I and the other neighbors that I've spoken to on the west side, all around them, other than the aldermans, are insulted and disturbed by that inference. I myself have asthma. I myself am a cancer survivor. And yet I've suffered no health issues as a result of their fire, which is directly across the street from me. Not even on the day of the event did I have any kind of asthma problems as a result. Housing prices have not been affected. There's no more animals or rats or anything. As a result, there may be contamination on the property. I'm not sure. There's a lot of allegations about that. There's one expert hired by one side, which is getting involved in all sorts of litigation, et cetera. I don't want to go there with that. I certainly know that if the aldermans choose to move, and I don't encourage them to do that. They've always been very lovely to me. When my partner passed away, they offered condolences. They were good neighbors to me. Christine even baked me a little zucchini loaf, or maybe it was Lori, I don't know. But if they choose to move, because this is so distressing to them, they don't have a problem to sell that house and get more than they ever paid for it. In any case, we know that the house actually is habitable. And this city needs affordable housing. Even if the Stanleys don't live there, it's a house that would do wonderful for students, for a single person. I've been in that house. It's really nice. I may not be a contractor, but I know Leonard who built the house, and I know the kind of standards that he has. I've also observed the Stanleys' behavior over the years. You've heard lots about the kind of advocates they've been. Lisa served design review. They've hosted neighborhood parties, get-togethers, any number of things. Dave Stanley has contributed, volunteered at Habitat for Humanity. They've done a number of things for me. And so I'm quite offended when the aldermans, and respectfully, I understand their point of view, but I really am offended when they propose to speak for the neighborhood, because other than what they're saying, and they have a monetary interest in what happens here, no one else is coming out and taking their side. We all seem to be supporting the Stanleys, not because the aldermans are wrong or bad, but because the Stanleys are hurting, and they are our neighbors, and they are our friends. And the lack of compassion for the Stanley children has been really appalling. So with that in mind, I see no damage to the neighborhood itself, nor are there any other neighbors who are saying that there's any reason to speed this up. All time should be allowed to do this in a manner that will least damage the Stanleys, because you are in a position to financially hurt them even more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I've also, okay, thank you. I've also gone through all of the speaker cards, but wanted to see if there's anybody else who wanted to make public comment at this time. Yes, Mr. Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. I disagree with Prue Draper when she says, well, first of all, we are all neighbors. That is true. But I disagree when she says that, you know, we all get along and so forth. We all don't get along. This is a diverse community.
Let's keep to the public nuisance issue.
The fact is that we don't always tolerate other people's point of view, and I'm a perfect example of being a victim of that myself. So the fact is that I've lived here for 20 years. I've been coming to these meetings religiously for 18 years, and I have never seen a public nuisance issue come before the City Council. Now, I may be wrong, but this is a case of first impression, the one to have a case come before you tonight. And my question is really quite simple. All I wanted to do this last year is ask, where are the Stanleys at this meeting? Where are the Stanley's attorney? Why haven't we been giving regular updates as to what's going on the property, what the Stanleys' needs are, what their kids' needs are, to inform the council where we are on this process, so we wouldn't have to be here tonight. We've come up against the 11th hour. We haven't seen the attorneys. We haven't seen the Stanleys. We haven't seen their neighbors who seem to want to go to bat for them all the time. No, so my heart goes out to the council. You have a job to do tonight, and you also have letters in your packet tonight that were submitted, and you're under a duty to read those letters into the record, not accept them into the record. You're supposed to read them. You're supposed to read them, and it is your duty as city council members to read them. The city also could be liable for any damages as a result of any extension. Do you realize that? Any damages that come to anybody in that neighborhood, and I'm not saying there's going to be, you could be held liable. And frankly, I am offended that no city council member has handheld the Stanleys through this incident from beginning to end. Any responsible city leader would have been in touch with them, would have taken their issues to the city council. Any attorney in this community, such as our mayor here, would have taken this case represented the Stanleys pro bono and helped. But here we are tonight, and if that had been done, there would be no reason for an application for an extension tonight. No reason at all. We would be right on track. And I understand the Stanleys have been through hell and back, but that does not relieve the responsibility of this council to find someone to represent them through this process, and we have gotten none. And it's shameful.
All right, thank you for that. And just to clarify, we do include all written notices as part of the record, and we are not required to read them into the record, just to clarify that point. Yes, Mr. Carricker?
Seems like the council has two pretty clear choices. There's a win-win and there's a lose-lose in this situation. And I understand that the Stanleys have been deeply damaged, and there's also been collateral damage to the aldermans. And this is one of those times when a dispute can be resolved by doing what's in the best interest of both parties. And it seems that what's in the best interest is giving the people who have the financial resources and the technical resources and the ability to abate the damage, environmental, whatever it is, professionally. This could be done by giving the two mega entities, the insurance companies and the mortgage company, time to come to a settlement so that it could be done without damaging the Stanley's future, and it could be done without creating any more environmental harm to the neighborhood. So win-win, give them the opportunity to let this play out a little more. Lose-lose, cause great financial harm to the Stanleys and possibly cause great harm to the neighborhood. Should be an easy one.
All right, thank you for that. I'm sorry, can we, I really we're trying to move things along here. So, yes, ma'am.
Elizabeth Wright-Florensko. I live in Cotati, and I'm very familiar with the proximity of the Alderman and Stanley homes. They're a few feet apart. So the reason the Aldermans are so upset is that Christine Alderman and her daughter Lori are both physically disabled. Christine was in the house when the explosion happened and when her own roof caught on fire. And to be called cranks or mentally ill or unreliable sources of information is completely unfair. Both of these families are victims. I have nothing against the Stanleys, but I think the Aldermans have been treated very badly because they were also victims. I agree with Mr. Carricker 100%. I don't think you need to order that structure be torn down, but I do think you need to order that the Stanleys themselves are not to complete the demolition work. You need a professional demolition contractor who will observe the applicable codes and protect the neighborhood from further environmental harm. You're completely ignoring the fact that a chemist analyzed the soil samples when the Stanleys power washed their driveway and it ran down into the sewer and the gutter and everything on Maple and School Street. You're completely ignoring the fact that the chemist found contamination in those soil samples. And there are still visible signs of contamination in the soil. And the Aldermans have been ill, and their cat died. I mean, it's been really horrible for them, too. And I think that the win-win situation is not to order that the structure that the Stanleys were formerly living in be torn down, because I don't see what that accomplishes at all at this point. I think you order the Stanleys themselves to leave the property alone and let the professionals take care of it. Now, whether that means that their insurance company and their mortgage lender are going to reach a settlement and abate the nuisance or rebuild the house or whatever, we don't know yet. I just think you should order the Stanleys not to continue doing anything themselves there, because that's the danger. They don't have the financial resources, and they endanger the community when they try to do things in a, sort of informal way. I think the city completely failed everybody after this fire, because the city did not step up and figure out how to take care of the environmental problems. The city just said, okay, we'll let the Stanleys stay there for a year, and did nothing. And meanwhile, the Stanleys were so angry that Lori Alderman had actually raised some important legal points. Yes. They were so angry that they harassed her to the point where she had to apply for a civil harassment restraining order from the Sonoma Superior Court, and an order was issued. It was stipulated, but it was issued. So everyone here is a victim, and you can solve the problem by just telling the Stanleys they can't do any more of the work themselves.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anybody else who did not get a chance to speak? Yes.
I am Nancy Hunt, and I am the nearest neighbor to the west of the Stanley property. And I was there when the granny unit was built in the back of the property. And I know that it was built to code. I didn't know that there was not a permit. And I don't know if there's other extenuating circumstances about it being illegal or whatever. But it is a very well-constructed building, and I think it would be totally wasteful to ask them to destroy that building. And it seems to me that it would enhance the property to have it remain. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anybody else who, yes?
Good evening. I had no plans on talking, but after listening to all the proceedings, longtime friend of the Stanleys, we were with them Friday night before the fire, borrowed a car from them.
stood in their kitchen with their boys. Saturday, I came to their house with fire departments and police officers and news media and friends gathering to support them in the most tragic thing I've ever experienced in my life. I pray to God whatever else go through. Talk about deer caught in headlights. It takes time to regroup and try to wrap your brain around what has happened, what has displaced your family, what do we do next on top of an amazing, ridiculous housing crisis. I have worked with Lisa and I chat almost daily on her ability to try to find a place to take her and her children and her dogs and her husband. Like they were actively looking. They did not purposely plant roots and decide to squat and dig in and say, we're not leaving without a fight. They were actively looking. And I'm sorry that it took 2 weeks too long, but my husband helped them move on August 15th, got them out of their house, got them on to a new start. I'm thankful that they're in my neighborhood. And I would like to ask George if he ever came over to offer any condolences for their losses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, is there anybody else who didn't speak already who wanted to speak during public comment? Okay. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I'm George Mulick. I live at 612 West Cotati Avenue. This is about the public nuisance comment. I just walked in. I'm a little late. I just want to say that these people have been really good neighbors, and they've always kept their house up. It's always been a model house. They've always done stuff to improve things. You know, they always had stuff going out in the garden for everybody to see, new improvements. The garden was great. And their life blew up about a year ago. And it's, you know, it's tough, and it's tough to come back for something like that. So I think whatever's gone on over there right now is just, you know, it takes a little time to get your life back together, and they've been trying to do that. But, you know, I just want to say that, you know, whatever the ordinances are or anything, sometimes you got to cut people some slack until they can get their thing together again. And they're trying really hard to get things back together again. But I just want to say they have never been a nuisance. They've always been great neighbors, and they've always kept their house immaculate until, you know, this thing happened. So I just think that there's got to be a little bit of wiggle room for people when they're going through some tough times. So that's all I'd like to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so is there anybody else who did not already get a chance to speak who would like to talk during public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. And then I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and reconvene. So we'll be back at 8:40. Thank you.
Microphone is on. I'm ready.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting back to order and bring it back to, oh, wait, we're missing staff. See, I rounded up everybody. All right, well, hang on just a moment. Oh, well, you know. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. So staff has informed me that they're actually in discussions right now, so we're asking for another 5 minutes. So thank you for your patience. We'll reconvene at 8:48. Okay, I have the green light from staff that we're all ready to go. So we're ready to resume the meeting. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it back over to staff briefly. They have a recommendation for us to hear before we begin our deliberations.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. After hearing the testimony from the Stanley's attorney and consulting with our own city attorney, staff has an amended recommendation for the council tonight. And the recommendation would be that the council recognize that the first condition, that is the habitation of the property, has been cured. So there's no reason to continue abatement on that, and that the council stay the September 28th deadline and authorize staff to work with the Stanley's attorney to abate the accessory dwelling on the property.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'll bring it back to council. And it was really good to hear a lot of people here today. And I'm sorry that we didn't hear earlier back in March when this first became an issue. So I'm glad that everybody was able to be here tonight and share their points of view. And I will see if there are comments from the council. So Councilmember Delasso.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor Skillman. Certainly I want to start out by saying very sorry about what has occurred. It's clearly a tragedy. I've never lost a home. I would never want to have to go through that horrid emotion. There's been a lot of emotion in this room tonight, and as you guys have really, I really have to say you behaved really well, because I could have seen this going in a lot of different directions from all the different speakers. So thank you for coming up and speaking your mind and letting us know. There's a lot of new information that came to my mind tonight that I had not heard or had been aware of, so it was very good to hear that. I strongly believe in compromises, and I think where we can try to reach a compromise, that's the wisest decision, if we can do that. And I think, I personally believe that there is a happy medium here somewhere. And our job is to do much more than looking at numbers. I know that was stated earlier, and we do much more than that. We listen to public testimony. We have mounds of paper that we go through in a relatively short period of time by the time we get our agendas electronically and in hard copy. And but we plow through this, and we make, individually, we make the best decisions that we can make with the information that we have. So the more information, I always say, the better off we are. And my recommendation was going to be something along the lines of what I think I heard from staff. A couple of points I had brought out was to see, from a legal standpoint, is there a way to mark the existing structure that's still on the property that it cannot be used, but not to tear it down at this point in time. And so that would have been one of my questions, and I kind of think I heard that in the direction that you were giving in that motion. Am I right? Sort of in that. So that's good. I believe that, I'm very concerned that there were no responses to the number of letters that were sent by the city. I don't understand why. I can't sit here and speculate, and that's not my job to speculate. So one thing I was looking at was, as part of a compromise, is okay. They've moved out. They've addressed and recognized that first condition. That's really good. That's important. But I want to make sure that, for the time being, until everything is said and done, that structure is not used as a residence. Don't know how we can do that, if it's signage, if it's working through the attorneys, whatever. That was going to be a suggestion of mine. And I'd like to sit here and berate the insurance and mortgage companies. I think everybody would be on my side when I start doing that, but I'm not going to go there. And I think that's part of another tragedy, is how slow that process can be. And that's incredibly unfortunate and has caused a lot of angst for everybody involved. So that, that was going to be sort of my direction and my suggestion to council members. But I think, obviously we need to hear from everybody else, and the fact that we have new recommendation, I think, has opened up some new light to the situation. So, again, thank you all for your patience and your emotions. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Harvey?
Am I on? Yes. I too am really sorry for your loss. I can remember as a young child, I think I was probably about 10 or 12, and my grandmother had an accident at her house with some cleaning solutions and destroyed their house. So I'm aware of what happens, and it does take a while for people to get back on your feet, and I really understand, the loss of all the personal things. I, to this day, have a little box with some burned up things that were my grandparents. It's hardly recognizable as jewelry, but it was theirs, and it is important to me. So I get it. I understand. I'm glad that staff is looking at a compromise. I, too, believe that we should, compromise on things, and I was hoping that there was going to be a better solution. I really want to understand whether or not ultimately that second structure really needs to be torn down or not. I'm hoping that, I get that it was probably well built, but it's not permitted, and if there's any way that, we can work with the Stanleys to make it right, that would be, I think, ideal, because I get that it's been there for a while, and I get that it was well built, and it too has some sentimental value. The one thing that I would really like to see in the future is a better amount of communication. I get that, it seems like it's been one-sided. We send out, a notice, don't hear anything. Send out a notice, we don't hear anything. So I would hope that the attorney would agree to communicating more with the city so that we kind of know where things are at. I think that was part of the problem, is we really, only from hearsay heard really what was happening. And I do understand that insurance companies and mortgage companies, they take their, own timeline on things. But I really would like, to have regular information to us. But I really appreciate staff, looking at a compromise situation.
Okay, thank you. And Vice Mayor Moore?
Well, it's obviously this is a horrible confluence event. Again, as the other council members have said, I offer my condolences, and I'm sorry for the loss. And it's never fun. I would concur with Councilmember Delasso that I think that if there's a way that we can reach some sort of a compromise, nobody wants to compound an issue and make it greater. When you are dealing with such a horrific event and the consequences of that, it does take time. And not everybody can fit into schedules like would be ideal. So with that in mind, I would certainly support looking at a stay. I have a concern on the stay and what that timetable would be. I do have some questions in reference to the insurance and the suits that are going to be brought forth or that are currently pending. And I know there may not be concrete answers, but I think within those questions, I would like to find out what those timetables look like and what the resolution to those is going to be. I have not heard yet what the desired goal is. If the goal is to rebuild on that property, if the goal is to sell that property and move to another location. So those are some of the questions I'd like to know, and that might allow me to put into a time frame when there might be some sort of a resolution to that. Knowing insurance companies and being in the insurance industry, I know how they can drag their feet and they can point the finger at others. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse that you currently have an attorney representing you now, in the sense that you had to actually have an attorney. Nobody necessarily wants to have to pay for an attorney. But if there's an attorney present now, there may be some weight to deal with the insurance companies and to say that they need to come to a resolution and however that works. So, you know, hopefully with the sense of urgency now, it can be something that can be closed out and you guys can move on to a much more positive chapter. So with a couple of questions remaining, I would be in support of looking at a compromise and possibly a stay.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to echo my council members' sentiments as well. It's a horrible tragedy that you guys suffered, and my son actually knows one of your sons. He went to school with him, so he was very much aware of what was going on, and so my heart does go out to you. And I have to say, I did come in with a very different view when I sat down tonight, which is one of the important reasons why we have public comment and have people come in and express what's going on, because all I was looking at is notices since March and having no information back. So I'm very glad to see that we've got a point person that we can talk to, that the city can talk to, and then also to echo what Vice Mayor Moore said, I think it will help greatly to have an attorney talking to the insurance companies, because for whatever reason they seem to listen to those of us with a JD, which is very unfair. But at least you'll get their attention. So that's very helpful. And I do know Mr. Applegate. I don't believe I've met Mr. Scott, but I know they're very, I know Mr. Applegate's very reputable, and I know that he and Mr. Scott will work hard to get this resolved as soon as possible. I do like the idea of not having a deadline on this, but I'm wondering if maybe we could have maybe a monthly check-in or something, or every couple, or maybe even as part of the city manager's report, just giving us an update on what's going on, just so that we can keep our eyes on what's happening with the property. And then one of the things I made a note of too that I really wanted to emphasize, a lot of people tonight have said very kind things and wonderful things about the Stanleys. The city has never considered the Stanleys a nuisance, ever. We're talking purely about the property and making sure that the property is in good working order and that everybody in the neighborhood is safe. So I just really wanted to emphasize that. This has never been anything about the Stanleys, for which we've heard nothing but glowing things tonight. So then I will bring it back to council. We've got the compromise.
May I ask another question?
Oh, of course.
A question of staff, if I could. So the point I brought up earlier, what assurances can we have that existing structure would not be used as a residence during this interim time period?
Yes, I would like to respond to a couple of the questions that the council members raised, as well as some of the community members. The structure that's on the property, as some people have acknowledged, was never permitted as a dwelling unit. It was permitted in the city records as a garage. The Stanleys have their own definition of what it was, but as far as city records go, it was a garage. So it was never a dwelling unit. The work that went toward making it into a dwelling unit was all without permits, and so what that means is that it never went through the process to guarantee that it was sited correctly, that it was sized correctly, et cetera. So there was a potential, as Mr. Stanley mentioned, that the structure could remain as an accessory to the primary structure for some purpose, but not habitation. So while it seems to be a waste of materials that are in it, that is the code. It wouldn't be permissible as a dwelling unit. So what we would do following the council action tonight is simply pull the utility service to the property and likely post it as well that it's not a habitable structure. There's the idea that someone if indeed it's not the Stanleys, that someone else would buy the property and that dwelling or that structure would add improvement value to the property. It could be true that a structure would add some value to it, but it's not, you can't have an accessory structure when you don't have a primary structure on the property. It wouldn't be, if it were to go through a design review process, as all structures do, it wouldn't meet today's design requirements or siding requirements. So there's no way around the fact that the structure has to be demolished in order to meet current codes. So I just want to be clear about that so that it's not a surprise to any of the neighbors that at some point the demolition will have to move forward. So in the interim, we would pull utilities to it and monitor it for signs of habitation.
Okay, yes. Did that answer your question, or do you?
Thank you.
Okay, and Councilmember Harvey.
Yeah, so now you made more questions for me. So there is nothing, if I understand you correctly, there is nothing that can be done to bring it up to code? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm saying that if there was a primary structure on the property so that therefore you were entitled to an accessory structure, it's possible that it could be remodeled to meet the current requirements. But given that there's no longer a primary structure on it, there's no way to permit an accessory structure.
So what would happen if a primary, if it just sat there and a primary structure was built? Could then it be an accessory structure? I just a little confused.
If there were a primary structure existing on the property, then someone could come in and say, you know, I want to legalize this unit. But absent a primary structure, there's nothing in the code that allows there to be an accessory structure. I know that's a little bit of a circular argument, but it's the way the code is set up, that you can't have an accessory when you don't have a primary. So many of the development standards are based on relationship to the primary structure. So without a primary structure on there, you can't meet all the development standards for an accessory.
But I guess the reason I'm confused is there was a primary structure when that structure was there, but that's the problem is the primary structure is what was involved in the fire, and that's, I think, what is trying to be replaced.
Well, it's not trying to be replaced. Okay. There's no action pending to replace the structure. The reason that the foundation of the structure is left is that in conversations with the Stanleys, they wanted to try and rebuild to the original footprint for a variety of reasons. I'm sure for theirs and for us, too, it enabled them a much speedier process to build to the current or the old footprint. But that time has passed. That was another deadline of the June 28th action, is that only exists for a year. And so any new structure that's built would have to comply to the current setbacks and size and design guidelines.
And we don't have any leeway with that at all?
No, that's a minimum standard of the code. And I just want to reiterate, there's no, as far as I know, there's nothing on the horizon for rebuilding that structure. The property is going to be sold for whatever the land value is or however the foreclosure action works, but there's not a house involved in that action. It's just the property.
Okay. All right, thank you. Still confused, but thank you. Then my second question had to really do with the contamination. What, if anything, can be done about the contamination?
I'll let Damien respond to that as well. The Stanleys pulled a demolition permit as they should have. It was inspected as necessary. They put stormwater protections in place when after the demolition and after they cleared debris. They had all of the stormwater requirements, protections that we required of them in place. Those were monitored by staff throughout the rainy season. We were called out to the property on several occasions by interested parties to look at that condition, and they met our requirements every time. We have no evidence that there is contamination on the site. There's definitely going to be something there from the fire. There will be residue in the soil. That's just the reality of having a burned structure. So anyone who buys the property is going to know that there was a burned structure on there, and will remediate the soil as part of a rebuilding process.
So that's when that gets taken care of, it is during the rebuilding of another structure?
Yes, as well as whoever is holding title to the property in the ensuing months between now and the rainy season will have to do the same thing the Stanleys did, which is protect it from off-site flows.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any questions on this side?
If I may, through the mayor, I would like to get a couple questions answered on what the direction is going to be and what the intent is at this point. From the Stanleys or the representative? Or?
Just want to open public hearing.
What's that?
I can tell you right now that I don't know, quite frankly, and I will try to find out as soon as possible. But the fact is, we were just retained on Sunday, made some phone calls yesterday, and I don't have any answers for you right now. I imagine my clients want to maintain their flexibility here as far as whether to decide whether to rebuild or decide to let it go through foreclosure and let the next owner worry about it. That's going to depend a lot on what sort of insurance money is available, what sort of remediation the insurance company and or the mortgage company is willing to do with the property. So I would like to get you those answers as soon as I can, but I don't have them right now.
What would you estimate would be a reasonable time to determine the direction there?
Well, I would like a couple months. I would like at least 60 days to try to figure out what's going on and get a definitive answer. I can tell you that I've worked in other matters with insurance companies and other matters with foreclosure proceedings. I represented a family up in Mendocino recently where we completely unwound a foreclosure that was already in the eviction process and got them a new mortgage, and that entire process took 4 years. And I don't want that to happen here, but I'm just letting you know that insurance companies like to wait you out. And so I would hope that within the next 60 days I could have something more definitive to you about what, first of all, the Stanleys plan to do about the property, and second of all, what the next owners, if they're going to be next owners, plan to do as far as remediation of any problems with the property.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
When the alternative suggestion was presented by staff, I don't recollect hearing a timetable on that stay. And then I did hear Councilmember DeLasso reference a open-ended or no definitive time on that?
No, I had a timeline, I just didn't state it at this point.
Okay. So at this point, that's only my concern. I think if you don't press the parties, i.e. mortgage and insurance companies, then they will drag it out forever. But if they know that there is a potential timetable, deadline that they really have to work with within the city, or any positive actions may not come into fruition, maybe that would help. So those are some of my concerns on there.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, I think that was part of my comments as well, was to at least have updates and communication from what's going on with the property through the city, so that we could know what was going on and keep an eye on the progress, because we definitely want to make sure everybody is taken care of in the neighborhood.
If a stay is requested or granted, does it have to have a timetable?
It does not have to have a timetable. I think staff's in agreement with some of the council comments that we would like to keep some expectation there of progress. So we were talking 60 or 90 days.
Which I would imagine would allow for some time at least to make a little bit more progress and hopefully determine a more clear sense of direction. I would be amenable to something along those lines.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and Councilmember Harvey.
So I agree with Vice Mayor Moore. I mean, I think if there's no time frame on it, then I think we could be looking at 4 or 5 years, because that's sort of the way some of those things work. So it seems like we should set a time frame. If we have to adjust it again, I'm assuming that we can go through the same process and adjust it again if it looks like there's progress and we, need to do that. But I think without giving them the tools that they need to kind of let the mortgage company, insurance company know that, yeah, this is serious, that they kind of will, do nothing. I mean, I think you are very well aware, some of the properties that we've had in town that have had garbage all over them that were owned by banks when we were going through the crisis with the mortgage. I mean, they didn't care. They didn't care. They just left it, sit there. So I think they do need deadlines in order to get moving, and hopefully that will help the attorneys.
Mayor?
Yes.
Just to add to the conversation some more. My recommendation was going to be 60 days, and I think not to put this tight timeline on anything, but I think 60 days could help the Stanleys and Mr. Scott to potentially force the issue with mortgage and insurance companies. It could work in reverse. I have no idea what their thought process is like. And I'd be amenable to 90 because I heard 60 to 90 was a recommendation. I think for resolution's sake, for the Stanleys, it would be better to just, keep this ball moving forward as quick as all of us collectively can in whatever authorities we have. And if it requires a letter from the city manager to say something to the attorney to say, here are the agreements that we came up with, one of which is, we need to have a decision in a 60-day period. That date is such. And then they have something in writing they can present. I don't know if any of that helps, but I think it can't hurt. So that was going to be my recommendation, was about a 60-day time period.
Okay, and then I had a thought, and I'll throw it out there, and we'll see what everybody thinks. I know. So what I was proposing, my idea is to have a deadline of November 28th, so that gives 90 days, but then we would request that the attorney come back at a September or an October meeting so that we can then get an update on progress, and then we'll know, because that way we'll have some leeway before the November deadline hits, where we'll have information coming into everybody and all parties can be involved in that, and then we can decide if the November date is realistic at that point, and then we can extend it out if necessary. But I think I'm kind of thinking like what courts do, where you set a settlement date and then you have an interim date. So that would be my proposal, if that would be acceptable to the councils, to set the November 28th as a deadline, just to give them something to propose to the mortgage companies. But then also request that one of the attorneys comes to one of our November meetings, October meetings. I'm getting myself confused. So if that would be something that we could propose, I see a summit going on over there, so I'll pause just a moment, see if, would that be something that would be doable if the council was agreeable to it?
Yes, we could do that. Of course, they don't have to appear to do a presentation, but the November deadline would stay. And you'd at the same time be authorizing staff to proceed if the November deadline wasn't met.
Certainly. And then we would just encourage communication, which is great that we have a point person as well to communicate with our city planner. So is that something that...
I would be amenable to that. I think that would help. I think the communication is going to be key. There was a comment that was made that I do want to address, that was in all the proceedings and all the hearings, everybody, and the comments that were made, both emotionally and from a position that was supportive of others. And the comment was that government is a machine. Well, we're government. We make up government. So when we have an opportunity to address concerns, even when information is presented and asked for questions and that information has come back, then that has the appearance of being a machine. But when there's a human interaction, we certainly can look at a situation and try to come up with an equitable solution, or at least pave the road to get to a resolution of something like that. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I would certainly be amenable to Mayor Skillman's suggestion on the dates.
Are we in need of making a motion tonight, or is this direction to staff since it's changed?
We do need to make a motion for the official language on the resolution.
Which is great because it's now changed. And I could sort of ad-lib it, but I don't know how close I'll get.
I think we can
Further
help you
dice.
with that.
What did you say?
I'm pretty sure that the attorney will correct you if
I
you
can
step too far out of
guarantee that.
bounds.
I can guarantee that. I don't know, but are we done with our discussion?
Do you have more to add?
No, I don't. Thanks for asking, though. All right, well, then I'd like to move, don't know if I'm going to get this in the right order, so bear with me. First of all, to recognize that the first condition has been cured. So far, there's a couple of nods in the yes, okay. And secondly, that we are interested in staying that 9/28 deadline and allowing the staff to continue to work with the Stanleys and their representative. And there's one more thing missing.
I think
November,
for a
right.
period of 60 days with a
For a period not to exceed, what, November 28th, I think was
exactly with a
suggested.
new deadline of November 28th.
How does that work, City Clerk? Did you get that? Yeah, great. Okay, well, everybody's happy, then fine. I'm happy.
All right, I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we have one abstention from Councilmember Landman. So
If we take
let
a
the
2
record
minute-
reflect that
If we take a 2-minute break, I can go track it
it's
down.
a 4-0 vote, so thank you. And we'll move on to the regular agenda items in just a moment once we get Councilmember Landman back. And thank you all for coming tonight.
For fee credits if a developer actually builds some of the projects in the impact fee report. There's a fee credit mechanism. It can benefit the community by collecting funds to make the needed traffic improvements and provide a mechanism to eventually mitigate the long-term impacts of development. And in the attached traffic impact fee report, I'll just point out, this is on packet page 110. There's a map that shows the locations of the various improvements in the impact fee, the draft impact fee report. There's a couple. Most of the impacts are funded in their entirety through the impact fee. There's a couple exceptions. There's on the west side. There's something labeled on this map on page 110 as the new north-south street, and then a new east-west street, and also the Gilman Ranch Isabel Drive extension. Those essentially include 35% of the impact fee, or of the cost of the impact in the fee. And the reason why that is because these are new streets that will be created with development, so the expectation is that roughly 65% of the actual physical improvements would be constructed by the properties that develop as they develop. In other words, we wouldn't necessarily buy property and punch a new road through an empty field. There'd be a new development. They would develop their roadway connections to be able to serve the development, and the remaining 35% that's included in the impact fee would really be to assist with the planning and also if there's a gap between segments of roadway, just to fill in small areas. So that's the intent of that. The impact fee report includes all the details of the various projects that are included in the fee study. And as it's mentioned in the staff report, there's no proposed action tonight on this. It's merely to look through the impact fee report and provide any comments. And actually, adoption of a revised impact fee would be a follow-on action at a future council meeting. So, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the draft fee report.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to council. Are there any questions for staff at this time on the traffic impact fee? That's okay. Yes, Councilmember Harvey.
What I found a little bit interesting was, of these 16 projects, if you will, that were in here, like 9 of them are associated with Highway 116. Now, I know that's a state route, so are, let's see, residents and commercial areas and all that paying for changes to a state route? Is that normal? Where is the state in this sharing of this, since it's their route? Can you help me?
So based on what's typical in other communities, it's not unusual. It is, as you point out, a state roadway, so the city doesn't have operational jurisdiction on that roadway. But what it does do is it provides a mechanism to provide a proportional share of the impact, of a future impact, a cumulative impact. So if a development develops along 116, they obviously have to take care of their short-term traffic and transportation needs, whether that's on 116 or not. But there's, the 20-year build-out horizon. Those are what we refer to as a cumulative impact. And so what it does is it provides a mechanism for that development to contribute a proportional share of their impact to a fund that would then be available to Caltrans, for example, as a local match for some Caltrans partially funded project. And as it stands without, so if there was no impact fee mechanism, then what happens is the development basically has to build the 20-year development on 116 at the time of development, and that is hugely expensive, and it's not particularly fair either in terms of their share of the impact. So it provides a mechanism to deal with that long-term impact and share the cost fairly.
So if I understand you right, these fees are really meant to help with a proportion of it, not necessarily to fund all of it. It does collect, so for every individual property, using the 116 example, for every property that develops, they'd be contributing some part of that 116 improvement, which cumulative impacts.
Yeah, for long-term impacts, and eventually that would accrue in a fund that the city maintains, and someday when Caltrans is ready to do some improvements on 116, they could come to the city and say, hey, we want to collect some of that impact fee that's been for the 116 improvements.
I think if I could too, I'm not as smart as Damien, so my brain is slower and easier to communicate. I think it's also an artifact of where the theoretically developable lands are. So the other streets that were primarily built out, we made no decisions to do widening in those areas. So the improvements that are there are targeted and more discrete, more about traffic flows and not about new streets, et cetera. So whether those projects on 116 ever go through because of environmental or other issues wouldn't get decided until actual project applications were on file. But we do need to plan for the road infrastructure for them.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Dalso.
We had a pretty long discussion on the Gilman Ranch Road during the general plan. And I know there was a question that came in from a citizen, too, on this. And I'm just trying to remember, is the connection that's on page 110, the packet page 110 on the map, is that the same connection that we have in the general plan then right now? Because I know there were some changes, they're not coming to me right now, unfortunately.
It's the same as the final general plan.
It is,
alignment,
okay.
Yeah, after discussions.
And Councilmember Lehman.
Yeah, I'm going to join Councilmember Harvey because I sat down reading through this, and boy, the questions did keep piling up. So let me ask first in general of staff, were you looking specifically to get into talking about some of these individual potential projects at this time, or are we looking at just some higher level stuff there? Because I had some questions about a few of these projects too. So I was curious. I recognize we're not making a decision on these. These are potential future projects that may or may not happen, and may, it's just that some of them certainly raise questions. So since they're here, I was curious, is that appropriate for us to be discussing tonight?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the projects that are in here were right out of the general plan traffic analysis. But yeah.
Well, first I'll hit you with a general question, and then I got a couple of slightly more specific ones. So, well, in a simplistic way of looking at this, we have a process where we look at traffic flowing. We have a certain level that we expect, level of service, level D. We have a funding structure now where if level of service drops below that, potentially we can mitigate that by usually widening roads, usually growing. So my question is, where is the break on this kind of iterative process that could happen, kind of a feedback loop of you widen the road, that enables more traffic, and we'll see growth in the surrounding areas, our city, so there'll be more traffic, which then again calls for another. I mean, there has to be something in the structure that calls out at a certain point, whoops, at this point, a limit's been reached. And we've talked publicly as we look at traffic through the center of town numerous times about that concern, as we look at the issues that our friends in Sebastopol are dealing with, trying to deal with traffic. They kind of got ahead of them in their downtown. I wanted to ask that because that's a concern I've heard, and it's a concern I've heard from the public. So if you could speak a little to that first, that's the first thing I wanted to ask you.
Sure. So I'll start off, and if Vicki has anything to add, I'm sure she'll jump in. So it's the general plan itself that controls how development happens and how the roadways that serve those developments occur. So, for example, in the general plan, there's policies about level of service. For example, Old Redwood Highway, where there's specific exemptions on LOS, so that if you drop below D, it doesn't trigger, for example, a 6-lane roadway. You just are willing to live with a lower level of service on that roadway.
So just because you exceed or drop below, rather, the ideal level of service, it isn't actually required or necessarily a next step at each point in time to go ahead and improve that to a higher level of service to increase traffic throughput. There are some breaks or protections built in the general plan for that.
In the general plan, yeah, there's some protections to guard against that issue that came up, which was the community character. That it doesn't just create a...
Yeah, I want to make sure that is reflected in here somehow, because it's an obvious thing. I think we all know that, but without it somehow, as part of this, when we're facing these issues, it could be a different group of people, it could be many years down the line. And I think that's something the community is concerned about. So that's helpful to me. Anything more that you can bring in, I'd be happy to hear some more on this.
Just quickly, as Damien said, as development projects come in, those are evaluated against the general plan and also the land use code. And the land use code designates what roads are appropriate for what zoning districts, and those have a set number of lanes, as well as, bike lanes and sidewalks or no sidewalks, et cetera. But that's set in the land use code, and that was what was the basis of the traffic modeling, and then these resulting projects used that baseline that's adopted in the land use code as what the capacity would be on the roadways, and then therefore the level of service. So every time we would get a development project in, we go to that roadway section that's previously been deemed appropriate, and then that is also the basis for their project-specific traffic study that looks at levels of performance or levels of service with those individual developments. So there are, in summary, I guess, there are a number of safeguards that are built into it that wouldn't just have the road be widened continually.
That's good to hear, and I think it should be underscored as part of this report when it comes in front of us in the future, and whatever guise it does, because I'm sure it will. So now, one question, thanks to Councilmember Harvey, I think was kind of answered. My understanding is, to a large degree, most of these large projects, with a few of the new streets potential streets off 116. Other than them, most of them are self-funded through the mitigation fund process?
Yes, most of the improvements are self-funded.
So essentially, that's kind of, they're paying for themselves, pay as you go. It isn't another portion of the community perhaps funding growth or excessive growth in another area.
Right, it's the impact fee does pay for the improvement, with the exception of those couple roads that I mentioned.
Okay, and I can see that, and that's, again, these are question marks, especially when you plan into the future, and I certainly know that. Anybody who wants a good bit of amusement, pull out a general plan from any city that's about 30 years old, 40 years old, and you'll be surprised where they thought they were going and where they finally wound up. So, okay, just two more. Actually, I lied, three more. Packet page 109, talking about Isabel Gilman, Design Protect. I just wanted to ask, and let me get to this page too. So as we talk about potentially, if growth happens in the area between those two, having a connector and that kind of block that exists between the two, in my understanding from our discussions during the general plan update, that the idea was to have a separation of the expected commercial on 116 and to keep that barrier and that feathering, if you will, between the residential area. So my question is, what design protections do we have planned, or will we be looking at design protections to keep that commercial area and the traffic that will naturally cause separate from the neighborhoods? Obviously, you'll want ways for those neighborhoods to enter and exit, but at the same time, we'll want to make sure something doesn't become a shortcut. Will this be part of the planning process? Because I think that might be important for that area.
Yes, the general plan language that addresses that future extension maps it clearly on a zoning map so that it's obvious what the intent of the placement of the street is, even though obviously it's not been engineered at this point in time. So the placement, as it would get built with development projects, would be evaluating that through the process.
I might even suggest when the time for design comes, we look into design features that would tend to discourage larger traffic that might take shortcuts and instead protect the ambiance for the people that actually live in that area, because I think that would be appreciated there. On page 112, packet page 112, we have a safety program listed. And I'm curious why, this seems to be a general thing. Why do we have this, instead of putting it in the individual projects as a percentage of that, why is it separate? Let's see, if we look at like page 134, way back towards the end of this. Let's see, actually, on 134, I see safety improvements citywide, and it talks about addressing safety issues in bicycle and pedestrian circulation systems, both of which I'm happy to support. But I noticed on the page just preceding, we already have a separate project for bicycle and pedestrian master plan improvements. So I'm asking, I guess, about duplication and why this is a separate kind of catch-all as opposed to just baked into the rest of the costs.
So what's termed, this is in Table 3 on packet page 112, which it's labeled Project O. It's the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan improvements, as you point out. That's based directly on the projects that are in the current Bike and Ped Master Plan and the costs in there. The what's called Project P, the safety program, is actually a general safety program for just sort of unanticipated. It's a relatively small amount compared to the rest, but it's a small percentage of the overall cost of the program, the fee program, and it's just basically for unanticipated safety improvements. So, for example, the city finds the need to put like Opticom, like a emergency vehicle preemption, on a signal, or enhance a crosswalk because there's some future safety issue. It provides flexibility to be able to fund those
That's
sort of minor
logical, and I
improvements.
can see why that wouldn't be part, at least, of the master plan. Certainly, you wouldn't be able to. So that
And-
makes a little more sense to me.
And
And
if-
I'll wrap this up because I've gone rather long. Thank you, Mayor. Just one last question. I know we could talk about all these plans. A lot of them make a lot of sense to me. Some I have some questions. If we look in packet page 127, at Old Redwood and East Cotati, as we're heading west, just past the fire station, or right next to the fire station, really, converting the westbound approach to through and right turn lanes only and eliminating the left-hand turn lane. I have to ask just real quickly, I tried to think about it, but I'm not sure how this is going to work as I thought of the other, because people will need and want to go that direction, and the other routes they might take. I wasn't sure if this was creating more issues, so I want to ask you just at least explain that one to me before we see it, because I know I'll hear about it from the public.
The intent of this project was to rearrange lane configurations to be able to deal with primarily with the queuing of cars heading, what I call southbound, right, on Old Redwood Highway.
Right.
Especially during the peak hours. And so it was to basically create a second left turn lane on Old Redwood Highway heading southbound and receiving that second lane on East Cotati Avenue. But that would require dropping, I believe it's the left turn lane on East Cotati, right there. And instead of making it a dedicated left, it would be a through left.
I see. Thank you. Okay. That's a little more clear. And I certainly have noticed throughout here, basically some town alert, long-term looking into increasing queuing, and I can see where that makes sense. Most of the areas, as I've thought about it, they are areas that do even now, from time to time, back up, so I could see 10, 20, and certainly as we start going farther than that, that might be necessary, much as we don't want to increase asphalt more than necessary. There'd probably be some value in that. Thank you for answering all the questions, and thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Did you have any other questions, Vice Mayor Moore?
No, just to follow up on that last comment, you would anticipate the traffic, 2 lanes turning left onto East Cotati Avenue and merging into one lane?
Potentially at some point in the future, yeah.
That will be interesting. No, most of the questions I had have been answered. Thank you.
Okay. And yes. Certainly.
You do have my permission, yes.
So, Councilmember Lindman and I are feeding off of one another tonight, I guess. So you talked about things paying for themselves, and you talked about projects coming forward and the fees being assessed. Some of these areas really won't have to do with projects per se in our area. So when I think about some of the changes, like the one we just discussed with the left turn lane and the things on East Cotati Avenue, that really has nothing to do with Cotati. It really has more to do with the development in Rohnert Park. And how do we really get, sort of impact fees from them to help fund some of this stuff? Don't laugh at me, Mark. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There we go. Okay. A toll signal there. So what, if anything, can we do about that? And the other thing that struck me based upon Mark's comments were the fact that, we just instituted the truck route, and he was concerned about, the new roads and cars going through the neighborhoods. Might that also be an opportunity for us to update that truck route so that the commercial vehicles went to the commercial area via the routes that we wanted them to take, not necessarily through the new neighborhood streets? Those were my 2 questions. Sorry.
Right. So I'll start with the second question first.
Okay.
The truck route ordinance that was just adopted tonight, that it currently only designates Highway 116 on the, if we're talking about the west side of 101, it currently only designates 116 as a designated truck route. So the same rules in terms of creating new neighborhoods on either side of 116, the same rules would apply as anywhere else in the city. So they, if it's a garbage truck, a bus, emergency vehicle, they still could go on it. And if they had a delivery need or they're going to a construction site in these neighborhoods, they'd have the ability to deviate using the shortest path possible to the point of delivery or construction. But they wouldn't be able to just go through the neighborhood because it's not a designated truck route.
But thinking that our industrial area, which is I think what he was alluding to, our industrial area is kind of back behind all of that, I would think that we would want most of that traffic to go down to the light at Redwood, turn down and come back up Hellman, rather than going through where we're going to have two other signals up farther and have them go through the neighborhoods, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, so there's nothing that precludes the council from adding truck routes, as issues come up in the future. If you start seeing trucks, despite the fact that it's not a truck route, you see trucks going through there because it's the quickest way from point A to point B, you can always amend the ordinance to add a designated truck route and try and prod along compliance by giving them an alternate route.
First question.
Yeah.
Would that be setting up a sting?
What's that?
I said, would that be setting up a sting?
Yeah, I can't say we do vehicle enforcement stings. I've never heard that term before.
I hadn't either.
But it sounds good.
So answering Councilmember Herbert's first question.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I diverge. So I apologize, it's late at night. What was
Having Rohnert Park contribute as well.
Yeah, so so I'll speak globally first, and I'll talk more specifically. There's been discussions at SCTA for many years about some sort of regional impact fee, because every city deals in one way or another with this sort of issue. Particularly us, because we're so integrated into Rohnert Park in terms of our boundaries. But every city on some level deals with something like this, where they have cross-community impacts, where traffic from one city is impacting another, and they think that they should participate in the cost of the upgrades or improvements or repairs. So there has been discussions at SCTA about it for many years, although it's just generally gone nowhere in the past for a variety of reasons. Another possible mechanism, if Measure M, when it expires, if that were to be renewed by the voters, there's a potential there that there could be some sort of regional pot of money that could be used for things like this, sort of jurisdictional impacts. But that would, of course, have to be developed with the ballot language if that were to occur. And so those are sort of broadly speaking, those are some possible mechanisms. More project specific, if you have projects that are occurring around the city, so let's use Rohnert Park for this example. If they have a new project going in, they do an EIR to disclose the environmental impacts of that project or a specific plan or whatever. And that traffic study associated with that EIR shows traffic coming through Cotati, and it impacts our road network in some way. We just through the process of being engaged in that CEQA document as it's being circulated, and commenting on it, it's not really a guaranteed way that they're going to mitigate your impact, but you can at least try to kind of nose your way into the process through comment, and hopefully have them set aside some money that they would provide to mitigate their impacts to your road network.
Okay.
I would just add quickly as well, if I could. That was a big part of the discussion that we had during the general plan EIR process, was how to balance the levels of service that we expect on our roadways, not to place them too low that our own residents were impacted, but not to place them so high that we would put ourselves into a position of having to widen our roads and destroy our character for the sake of as Damien said, inter-community traffic. So that was a big part of the strategy going into setting those thresholds, was trying to balance all those issues.
Yeah, and that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. It's an excellent point, because for Old Road Highway specifically, the policy was written in a way that the level of service the level of service minimum that would be deemed a impact is higher for like a Rohnert Park development than it would be for a City of Cotati development, to address that issue specifically.
Okay, thank you. And the only comment I was going to make briefly was that my understanding, too, is that developers like having this to be able to know what their fees are going to be up front. And so I'm getting nods. So, yes, that was just one brief comment I was going to make. So let's now open it up to public comment. Is there anybody who wanted to comment on the traffic impact fee? Yes, please.
Yes, good evening, Council. I really appreciate the way everybody handled that earlier, very heartbreaking event with the local community. So that was congratulations on that, and hopefully it sorts itself out. But I just wanted to ask on the traffic impact fee, what was WTRAN's methods for coming up with just one uniform view of Cotati? So when I looked at this and the improvements that were proposed, 74% of it was the new roads along 116. So essentially that new area, and it just seems to me that that's the area that would really attract specific, development fees as it evolved. So I just wonder why WTRANS came up with just that one monolithic method, and then resulted in one monolithic fee for the whole of Cotati on that. There's also, I believe, been a change since the general plan in the EIR, that no longer is there a requirement in the EIR, and it was interesting news that there was a requirement for EIRs to look at traffic impacts. Now those traffic mitigation can be done in other forms other than just pouring it into more asphalt or more roads. So it can be done into other forms of what would essentially reduce the vehicle miles traveled. So again, that didn't seem to come up in that WTRANS report, that there would be other ways. I think there was like one perhaps paragraph mentioning it, or half a sentence mentioning that there might be other ways of dealing with it. But that was my really sort of like comment, that I hope we're not going to, with the fees, lock us into particular activities in the future. And it's how can we develop the town as it's been kind of continuing along on its developed, more pedestrian-friendly, reducing vehicle miles traveled. And yet at the same time, there's a 116 corridor that if that develops, there's a place for fees to be charged and for developers to know what that is. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to comment on the traffic impact fee? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the council. So my understanding is there's nothing really to vote on. It was just a matter of incorporating the comments tonight into a traffic impact fee report that'll come back to us to vote on at a future date. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
However,
yes,
I do have just one more comment I'd like to make.
Absolutely.
So packet page 104, which is page 2 of the draft WTRANS study. I love to do physical labor, but in the second paragraph that begins with the newly adopted general plan, on the second line it discusses opportunities to fund maintenance. And I'm all for that, but I'm guessing they meant to say fund, and I'm pretty sure that got carried over into the staff report, but I think it's important that it gets corrected in the study.
All maintenance is fun. So.
Yes, all maintenance is fun. Thank you for that comment.
So I'd like to officially note through the chair that Councilmember Delasso is taking the fun out of things.
Okay.
So be it.
So noted.
I wonder if we could just add to the general direction a point that was raised by the public in terms of, as we go forward in the future, looking at these various mitigations. And I know it is mentioned here several places how any improvements to walking, biking, mass transit, the type of things, or live work that tends to reduce vehicle travel also reduces that need for expansion. And it's in there, but I wonder if there are any particular projects that seem likely to associate with any of these future things. They should be tossed in there too, just to get them on the record. I'm sure that's assumed by there, and I know it's mentioned, but not a bad idea. A full quiver of arrows to deal with the problem with.
Yeah, I think, the Bike and Ped Master Plan and the safety improvements would fall into those general categories. The Bike and Ped Master Plan is a continually evolving document. And the important part in this is that the project is incorporated in the impact fee, the project, right? So as long as the Bike and Ped Master Plan as a project is in the fee, then it creates a legitimate use for that fee for projects within that plan. If you exclude it from this, then you can't ever use it for that purpose. So it creates the placeholder to be able to do those sort of things. The speaker brought up a point of evolving CEQA law. So it's true that that CEQA, the part of CEQA law that's talking about transportation impacts is moving to the VMT model, although I don't know that any final guidance has been published at this point. But what that means in practice is that the mitigation for the VMT impact would be required under state CEQA law, but the LOS impacts and the study of level of service and the impacts associated with that, I don't see going anywhere anytime soon. But that might be, it would most likely be handled as I'm anticipating this eventually to roll out. That would most likely be handled at a local level. So in other words, the local jurisdictions would still require the measurement and impact analysis for LOS, but it wouldn't be a CEQA law mitigation or a CEQA mitigation under state law, which would be the VM. So you'd have a combination of mitigations that you have to impact. Combination of impacts you have to mitigate.
Yes, Vice Mayor Moore.
And one other quick question. There's nothing down the road that if the situation merited, we could not, there's nothing to preclude us from changing these fees, correct?
Right. The study can be updated and the fees
right,
can be modified.
because this is kind of a snapshot right now and what may occur or may not occur. And if we needed to, we could go up or down.
We could, yeah.
Probably never go down, but it could go up.
I wonder if actually when that comes to us for fees too, I noticed that we would just look at some of the larger fees, and that gives me an idea of where we're standing with the proposed fees, but I probably, when the time actually comes to set those fees, I probably want a slightly deeper background to have a better sense of exactly where we stand on that. That would be helpful.
In terms of other types of fees or just the traffic impact fees?
All the various fees in a deeper comparison with other surrounding communities.
Okay.
And if it gets to the point where it's very difficult and becomes more of an apples to oranges comparison, then I would understand not being able to go too much deeper. But to the degree you can, I think it would be helpful.
Okay, so I think we've all given our input and provided direction. So thank you to staff for putting that together, and we look forward to seeing the next report. I'll move on to correspondence and pending legislation, and there are no items, so that will be a very quick skip over to the city manager's report. So I will turn again to Mr. Obid.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council. So I just wanted to announce a couple things. There's some new businesses coming to town that are pretty exciting. 707 Brewing's a microbrewery that is going through the process right now, and that would be over by it's Grab and Stones, I believe, the shopping center, by Mercy Medical. Yeah.
Nice.
So it hasn't been issued yet, but it's going through the process. So it's a good development. Also, I think everyone's seen the sign up for Super Burger from Pengrove up at Apple Valley, or at Grapevine, I mean. And I wanted to also say that there is the newest Habitat for Humanity home up at Woodland Hills will be dedicated on September 15th at 1 p.m. So that's very exciting. And and we also, the last couple weekends, we've had some successful events in the park. The Vienna Bonanza a couple weeks ago, and Accordion Festival last week, which was packed. So, yeah, it's all been very good. That's it for now.
Okay, great. And now I'll move on to city council reports. So I'll start to my left, Councilmember Landman.
Thank you, Mayor Skillen. Got a few things for you tonight. First of all, just a heads up for the mayor and for my alternate legislative committee. We did, as you remember previously in the summer, had a field trip scheduled potentially to go to Sacramento to do some legislative outreach, which was canceled, unfortunately, due to numerous scheduling problems. And in those, we'd like to take an extra person, ideally either our alternate or our mayor, whoever's available and whoever has the interest. These are coming back online. We are looking at going to the city of Sonoma, so not so far a drive, much better, and asking our Assembly members Levine and Dodd, as well as Senator Wolk, to potentially meet us there on Wednesday, October 16th. So that would be one meeting if you were free. That would be a morning meeting. If either of you would like to come, I would be happy to have you there. And then following that, the next month in November, I believe the 20th, which is a Friday, at our regular legislative meeting, usually in Santa Rosa, we'd be trying to see if we could schedule Assemblymember Wood and Senator McGuire, which should be a exciting event. So bottom line, I'll ask you to check your schedule, see if there's interest and availability in both for all of the council, as well as the staff or any of the public who are interested. If you have any issues, legislative goals that might be worth us taking advantage of this opportunity to talk to our legislative folks, this would be a good time to get them forward to me, to take the ledge, and for us as representatives to help see what we can do with that. Speaking of which, it's a perfect segue to the last thing I wanted to mention. As you remember, the last time we did this and went up to Sacramento with Ledge, the big talk was transportation funds for cities. That's a huge issue, and this probably won't be news to my staff, but it's kind of good news perhaps to the council if some of you hadn't heard it. The discussion in the transportation resolution, hopefully this all comes together early September. We should know if it does, but potentially Cotati could see, let's see, the number we're looking now is $344,739 annually for 10 years. This would be not for new streets, but basically for local road repair and maintenance. The goal is statewide to get, what they're trying to get up a full 10 points, I believe, or something, or I'm sorry, to kick us up how high? I mean, it's a huge goal.
Yeah, they're trying to statewide get the PCI average, the road condition average. I think it was up to, I want to say 70. I mean,
it's a big thing, because if you look at last year, Cotati, we did it 36, 7, 40% of our local roads almost, and I thought, well, gosh, we're going to have great PCI numbers. I can hardly wait till the next mayors and council members to tout these. But then what happens is you're going to these roads that are just ready. They need the repairs now before they get expensive. The other roads that you haven't worked on this year, drop down one more click. And as it turns, we didn't move too much, even with that significant investment. So to take the whole state up that far in 10 years could be a very good thing. So that's exciting, and I wanted to bring that back to you, let you know that sometimes going and saying that over and over and over helps. So cross your fingers.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Moore?
I attended the Accordion Festival, very nice. Good crowd, nice weather. I did not attend the Anna Bonanza. And then I did attend the Library Advisory Board meeting last week, and they are doing some more outreach, and I believe September is the Library Card Proclamation Month.
Yes, and we have that on the agenda.
Yeah. So, and they may be coming out with a limited edition 30,000 card Snoopy edition library card through the Schultz Foundation. So they're very excited about that. You know, you were talking about the legislative meeting being exciting.
Snoopy and Senator McGuire, both good things. You can't go wrong.
And that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Harvey. Sure.
At the Waste Management Agency meeting last week, we accepted the resignation of the Executive Director, Henry Mikas. That's sort of the bad news. The good news is we appointed and were able to work out with the county through the county system Patrick Carter, who has worked with the agency for a long time as the interim director. So Patrick has agreed, and the county was able to work it out. So Patrick will be beginning as interim director. We had quite a bit of a discussion on the JPA status. It seems like they're pushing very hard on the model of RCPA. They're just pushing, right, wrong, or otherwise. There's a couple of folks that somehow think that that's the county doing it. I had to point out that when we asked for the report the last time, that there was the JPA model and this hybrid model and the county model, and that were we going to get the information back on all three models, and because it had appeared that all of a sudden they dropped everything but the one. And it's just like, well, wait, no, we as a board asked, for all of them to get looked at, so we had to reiterate that, but supposedly they're going to come back with information about that. There is some, there may be some problems with RCPA doing that because of they aren't a JPA, so the powers that they have are not the same as a JPA, so more to come on that. I think they're involving all of the attorneys so that they can kind of weigh in on that. So I'm sure that Robin will get involved in that. And then the last really good thing, because we're out hauling all of the composting stuff because of the closure of the composting, staff had come back with some really good ideas on some things to do-it-yourself composting. So they're working through some of that stuff. So we're going to get some really good things available for people to do-it-yourself composting. Some videos, some sessions with people, and different things like that. So hopefully that will help get some of it from being out hauled. But that's all I have.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I wonder if I could just ask a quick question of Councilmember Harvey, because
certainly.
Looks like you're dealing with this now, and it looks like it might come my way at SCTA RCPA.
Might.
Yeah, may well, sure seems that way. Funny how that works. I wanted to ask you, just so I have a good sense, since we'll be discussing, I had the perception, perhaps, that at the time when all the cities were looking at the matrix, that the general greatest amount, that the majority, at least, of the cities expressed a support for the JPA model. Would that be a correct impression? Is that close to being right?
The majority did, but there were about 4 cities that wanted the county to do it. Unfortunately, the county kind of has sidestepped that, and their solution, if you will, to that has been this
Well, it would be lovely to be able to step back and have the county do it, except for if we look back at not that recent history when the county was doing it and wanted to close it down, all of a sudden it wound up encompassing all of us in a rather difficult and potentially expensive way, so it might behoove us to stay involved with it, certainly. That's good for me to hear, because that was my understanding, and I'm glad to see people are looking at the difference in representation, because regardless of any other issues RCPA might have in handling this, the difference in representation, the JPA, we have essentially one representative from each involved agency, which some, I believe, are elected, some are staff, and that all works fine. That's a good balance. But there's essentially one vote from each interest party. Right. SCTA's board is somewhat different, and then you have representatives from all the cities, but there are always at every meeting, or most meetings, 3 sitting supervisors, and I believe the rules further call for a supervisor to always either be chair or vice chair. So it's not intensely problematic. It's been that way for well over a decade, long before I got there, and it's not something I've ever been terribly concerned about. But if I'm being asked to consider giving up a JPA over something potentially expensive like this, as we've seen already, then and since it can involve us, as we've seen, that control makes a difference. And I don't think there's an interest in talking about how SCTA RCPA is staffed or how that board is comprised, but if you're going to bring that discussion forward, you're almost demanding that discussion too, and I don't know if that's helpful. If it can be settled ahead of time in a better direction, I think that would be great.
I think that will become really important at some point, because one of the things that's going to get us to our diversion goals is really getting policies set out there. And it makes it a little bit difficult if you have, if you will, a weighted vote, and there's not one vote per person. So
it would be helpful if there was time before we visit this issue at RCEPA, if our representatives on the Waste Management Board could actually give some direction in terms of what they prefer seeing and what concerns they might have and what direction they'd like to see this go. That might be helpful to those of us representing then on that board.
Right. As soon as we get this report back with more, dollars around it and how it would look like and what it would look, I think the whole council should see it. And as a point of order with all of this, when they get the stuff prepared and ready, they're going to do another matrix and have the cities go back through it, because it's not the same as what people filled out, if you will. So it may spin a little bit differently once people see what's.
May wish to ask them to delay then bringing that to SET-RCPA until that's completed, because I think if that's the route, this is one of the rare times. I'm always happy to make a decision as your representative, but in this one, I actually would like, seeing where it winds up, to come back before the council so I can give you my thoughts, but then you can give me your direction. So, because this sounds like this could be a relatively important decision.
Right,
for our
and
community.
that's why that's sort of the difference, is that with the JPA, really you have to have the inputs from the cities. And the way our CPA is working, there's not really that same, gee, let's check with the councils, make sure everybody, the council
I wonder if you
is-
could ask at the next meeting, agendize just that question, if you could request the Board of Supervisors to delay bringing this to SET-RCPA until all the cities, until the data you talked about has come in, until it's come before all the various councils to have a chance to assess this and decide what they think the best direction is.
And I don't
Because it seems
understand
foolish
why
to make a decision.
why they would bring it. Why would they bring it forward? It's not. The parties haven't agreed to it, so why they would bring it?
I can't say with
before.
certainty that's an action item as yet, but I just understood that it is something that's in the offing. So I think that just making sure that time. So when it does come before us, we'll have all the information we need to actually make that good decision.
And they really shouldn't bring it there until they brought it before the agency board, and the agency board agrees that that's the direction that they want to go in.
I would agree with that
Yeah.
personally, too. Let's hope that's the plan.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Councilmember DeLasso.
So just a couple of very brief items. One that Vice Mayor Moore forgot, and that was on Monday, August 17th. We attended the Thomas Page Academy ribbon cutting ceremony. So, and for people that don't know, there was $12 million that was set aside for Thomas Page Academy, and it's a completely renovated, newly built school. And when they use the term portable buildings, it's not your grandmother's portable buildings. These are pretty impressive buildings with 2-story high clear-story windows, a ton of natural light, automated window shades, and because everything's so spanking new, this was the day before school was going to start, and so the teachers were frantically running around getting all their supplies and equipment in there, but it was a beautiful job. So when we do talk about the Cotati-Rohnert Park Unified School District, Cotati got its share of $12 million for this project, which is it's great. You need to get there to see it. This Thursday, I'm going to have the monthly Ag and Open Space Committee meeting and the Agricultural Subcommittee. And offline for Councilmember Landman, you stated that one in October, you said Wednesday the 16th, but Wednesday is the 14th, Friday is the 16th. So I'll just check in with you after the meeting on that one, just to double check your calendar.
I think we'll work through that by email. Something seems amiss here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And if I may just add to that, Councilman Tolasso, those are modular buildings and not portable?
Modular. Thank you. That was the
And
yes.
it's also going to be a model for what they're going to use for the rest of the district on some of the remodels. So it looks very impressive and much more open and airy and conducive to learning.
And even the outdoor spaces, you know, there's new playground equipment. They have high-tech materials, not that crushed rubber in the ground anymore. It's I don't know what the material is. It looks like something you'd throw in an aquarium. Wasn't quite sure what it was, but it was very
something
impressive.
synthetic.
Something very synthetic, but yeah, it's a great. If you haven't been out there, you do need to see it.
Very nice.
Okay, terrific. And you guys already talked on most of what I was going to say, that we had the Accordion Festival just this weekend. I also attended the ribbon cutting at the Mercy Wellness, and it was really interesting to get a tour of the facility and see how much security is in place. And one of the things that really struck me, too, is I believe it was one of the owners who was giving the tour. He's actually upgrading at his own expense the cameras on the outside of his building so that he can, I guess one of the neighboring businesses was recently the victim of a robbery, and his cameras weren't able to pick up enough digital information to get a license plate off the car. And so he actually upgraded the cameras specifically because he says, you know, I'm hoping that that doesn't happen again, but I want to be able to help my neighbors if that does happen in the future. So I was really impressed by that. I did stop by Anna Bonanza. It looked like there was a good turnout despite the incredible heat we had that day. And then lastly, went to the mayor and council meeting, I can't speak, it's after 10, mayor and council members meeting in Rohnert Park. And that was a lot of fun, actually. They gave us a quick preview of a couple of songs from the Mary Poppins presentation, so because since the meeting was out at Spreckles. So unfortunately, they told me they can't start all of their meetings with a musical number, but I did at least make that request. So anyway, that concludes our meeting for tonight, and we'll call this meeting adjourned at 10:15. Thank you.